Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Vembo, and I read a collection of Reddit stories for you every evening. I've seen quite a few new faces in the comments telling me what time it is, so make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you are new and want to hear more Reddit stories. Tonight, I've gathered a collection of Am I the Bad Person stories. Some of these are going to make you shake your head, others might hit a little too close to home, and a few will probably have you questioning everything you thought you knew about human decency. Anyway, grab whatever, get comfortable, and let's explore some truly messy situations together. Fair warning though, some of these people are definitely the bad person, but I'll let you be the judge. Our first story comes from someone dealing with one of the most complicated family situations imaginable. Am I the bad person for refusing to pick up my husband's affair partner's child? I never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. My husband had an affair 2 years ago with a woman named Sarah. It lasted about 8 months before I found out. The whole thing nearly destroyed our marriage, but we decided to try counselling and work through it. Here's where it gets complicated. Sarah got pregnant during the affair, and the baby is definitely my husband's. My husband wanted to be involved in the child's life, which I understood, even though it was incredibly painful for me. We have our own 7-year-old daughter, and I didn't want her to grow up not knowing she had a half-sibling. Sarah and I have managed to be civil for the sake of the children. It's not friendship by any means, but we can have conversations about practical matters without it turning into a screaming match. My husband sees his son every other weekend and pays child support, which has put a strain on our finances, but we're managing. The issue started about 6 months ago when Sarah began asking me for favours. First, it was small things like, could I drop off some clothes that no longer fit our daughter since they're only a year apart in age? Then she started asking if I could watch both kids when my husband had to work late during his custody time. I said yes to these requests because I genuinely wanted to help, and I was trying to be the bigger person. But last month, Sarah asked me something that crossed a line for me. She wanted to know if I could start picking up her son from school on the days when I pick up my daughter, since their schools are only 10 minutes apart. She explained that she had started working longer hours, and it would be a huge help if I could grab both kids and watch her son until my husband got home from work. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that arrangement. Picking up my own daughter and caring for her after school is part of my responsibility as her mother. But taking on regular childcare duties for the child my husband had with his affair partner felt like too much to ask of me. Sarah got upset and said I was being selfish. She pointed out that I'd helped before, and that this would just be extending that help a little bit more. She said her son asks why his sister gets picked up, but he has to stay in after school care, and it's confusing for him. My husband was torn when Sarah brought it up with him. He said he understood why it would be hard for me, but he also felt bad that his son was in after school care when his sister wasn't. He suggested maybe we could work out some kind of schedule where I pick up both kids once or twice a week instead of every day. I said absolutely not. I explained that I had already stretched myself emotionally to accommodate this situation more than most people would. I was willing to be civil with Sarah. I was willing to let both children play together during custody visits, and I had even babysat her son when emergencies came up. But I was not going to become a regular childcare provider for the child that resulted from my husband's betrayal of our marriage. My husband accused me of taking out my anger about the affair on an innocent child. He said his son didn't choose to be born into this situation and deserved the same consideration as our daughter. I told him that while I agreed the child was innocent, that didn't make me responsible for his day-to-day care. Sarah started telling mutual acquaintances that I was cruel and selfish for refusing to help with basic childcare when it would be so easy for me. She said I was punishing a child for his father's mistakes, and that any decent person would help a single mother in need. Some people have agreed with her. A few of my friends have said that since I've already accepted the situation and the children get along well, it wouldn't be that much extra work to pick up both kids. They've pointed out that it's only a 10-minute detour and that I'm already doing after-school care for my daughter anyway. But others have been supportive of my decision. My sister said I've already gone above and beyond what anyone should expect of a betrayed spouse, and that Sarah has some nerve asking me to provide regular childcare for her child. My mother said that while the child is innocent, I'm not obligated to take on parenting responsibilities that aren't mine. The situation has created tension in my marriage again. My husband feels caught between trying to be a good father to both his children and respecting my boundaries. He suggested paying for after-school care for both kids so neither one has to stay late. But Sarah said that wasn't the same as family picking them up. Last week, my daughter asked me why I don't pick up her brother like I pick up her. I tried to explain in age-appropriate terms that sometimes adults have different responsibilities and that his mum or dad pick him up from school. She seemed to accept this, but it made me wonder if I'm creating unnecessary complications for the children. I've been second-guessing myself constantly. Part of me wonders if I'm being petty and making things harder than they need to be. The practical side of me knows that picking up both kids really wouldn't be that difficult. But the emotional side of me feels like I've already sacrificed enough of my peace and dignity for this situation. Am I being unreasonably stubborn about this? Should I be more flexible for the sake of making things easier for everyone involved? Or am I right to maintain this boundary even if it causes some inconvenience and hurt feelings? That story ends right there. And honestly, I can't even imagine being asked to provide regular childcare for your husband's affair baby. Like, the level of emotional strength it would take just to be civil with the other woman is already impressive, but then being expected to become a built-in babysitter? That's asking way too much. Some boundaries exist for good reason, and this feels like one of those situations where being the bigger person has already gone far enough. Let's move on to our next story about family dynamics and the price of standing up for your relationship. Am I the bad person for not inviting my sister to my wedding? I'm getting married in 3 months to my fiancé Jake, who I've been with for 4 years. Planning this wedding should be one of the happiest times of my life, but my family has turned it into a complete nightmare because of my decision not to invite my sister Emma. Emma is 2 years older than me, and we've always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was constantly criticised and compared to her. She got better grades, she was more popular, she was the one my parents bragged about to their friends. I learned to live with always being second best, but I thought things would improve as we became adults. When I started dating Jake, Emma immediately took a dislike to him. At first, I thought maybe she was just being protective, but her behaviour went way beyond normal sister concern. She would make snide comments about his appearance, his job, his family background, really anything she could think of to tear him down. Jake works as a mechanic, which is honest work that he's passionate about and good at. But Emma constantly makes jokes about him being a blue-collar worker who will never be able to provide for me properly. She's a corporate lawyer, and she acts like that makes her superior to everyone else in the family. The comments started small, but escalated over time. At family dinners, Emma would ask Jake condescending questions about his work, like whether he enjoyed getting his hands dirty, or if he planned to do something more respectable someday. When Jake would try to participate in conversations about current events or books or movies, Emma would make little digs about how surprising it was that someone like him had opinions about intellectual topics. Jake handled it with more grace than I would have. He tried to laugh off her comments and avoided engaging when she was clearly trying to provoke him. But I could see how much it hurt him, especially because my parents never said anything to defend him. The breaking point came at my birthday dinner last year. Emma had been drinking and decided to give an impromptu speech about how concerned she was about my relationship choices. She said she hoped I would come to my senses before making any permanent decisions about my future. She actually suggested that maybe I was settling because I was afraid I couldn't do better. Jake excused himself from the table, and I followed him outside. He He was trying not to cry and told me he didn't understand why Emma hated him so much, when he'd never done anything to her. He said maybe he really wasn't good enough for me, and that Emma could see something he couldn't. I was furious. I went back inside and told Emma her behaviour was completely unacceptable, and that she owed Jake an apology. She laughed and said she was just being honest about what everyone was thinking, but was too polite to say. She said Jake was obviously not in my league, and that I was making a mistake that would ruin my life. My parents tried to smooth things over by saying Emma had just had too much to drink and didn't mean what she said. But Emma doubled down the next day, texting me that she stood by everything she'd said and that someone needed to tell me the truth about my relationship. Since then, Emma has continued her campaign against Jake. She makes comments on social media about how some people have low standards. She tells extended family members that she's worried about me because I'm making poor choices. She's even suggested to my parents that they should try to talk me out of getting married. When Jake proposed 6 months ago, Emma's reaction was to ask me if I was sure I wanted to tie myself down to someone so young. Jake is actually 3 years older than me, but she was implying that he was immature and irresponsible. She said she hoped I would have a long engagement to really think about whether this was what I wanted. As we started planning the wedding, I realised I couldn't imagine having Emma there. The thought of her sitting in the audience with that disapproving look on her face, or worse, making some kind of scene during the ceremony, filled me with dread. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and I couldn't bear the idea of having someone there who actively disapproves of my choice to marry the man I love. So I made the decision not to invite her. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I just didn't include her when I was putting together the guest list. I figured she would realise she wasn't invited when she didn't receive an invitation. Emma found out about 2 months ago when my cousin mentioned something about the wedding and asked if Emma was excited to be the maid of honour. Emma immediately called me, demanding to know why she wasn't invited to my wedding. I told her honestly that I couldn't have someone there who'd spent years insulting my fiancé and making it clear that she thought I was making a terrible mistake. I said this day was about celebrating my relationship with Jake, and having her there would cast a shadow over everything. Emma completely lost it. She said I was being ridiculous and vindictive, and that family comes before everything else. She claimed she was just trying to look out for me, and that excluding her from my wedding was cruel and petty. She said she would never forgive me for this. My parents were horrified when they found out. They said I was tearing the family apart over wedding drama, and that I needed to be the bigger person. They pointed out that Emma is my only sister, and that I would regret not having her at my wedding someday. They've been pressuring me constantly to change my mind and invite Emma. My mum cries every time we talk about the wedding and says she can't believe her daughters won't be together on such an important day. My dad said Emma's behaviour might not have been perfect, but that excluding family from major life events creates permanent damage to relationships. Extended family members have gotten involved too. My aunts and uncles keep calling to try to mediate and convince me to invite Emma. They say she's probably just jealous that I'm getting married first and that her behaviour comes from a place of love and concern, even if she expresses it poorly. Emma has been telling everyone who will listen that I'm being childish and holding grudges. She's painted herself as the victim who was just trying to be a caring sister and is now being punished for speaking the truth. Some family members have said they might not come to the wedding if Emma isn't invited because they don't want to be part of a family feud. Jake has told me repeatedly that he doesn't want to be the reason I have problems with my family. He's even suggested that maybe we should elope to avoid all the drama, but I don't want to give up my dream wedding because my sister can't behave like a decent human being. I'm starting to doubt myself though. Maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I should invite Emma and just hope she can control herself for one day. Part of me wonders if I'm making a permanent decision based on temporary anger. But another part of me feels like this is about more than just one day. This is about setting boundaries and showing Emma that her behaviour has consequences. If I give in now, she'll know she can treat Jake however she wants, and I'll always forgive her because she's family. The wedding is getting closer and the pressure from my family is increasing. Everyone keeps telling me that family's forever and that I'll regret this decision. But I feel like Emma should have thought about that before she spent years being cruel to the person I love most. That story comes to an end there. This is one of those situations where family loyalty gets weaponized against someone trying to protect their relationship. Emma spent years being openly hostile and disrespectful, but somehow OP is the bad guy for not wanting that negativity at her wedding. Sometimes protecting your peace means disappointing people who think their family status gives them unlimited permission to be awful. A wedding day should be about joy and love, not managing someone else's bad behaviour. Our next story takes us into the complicated territory of estranged family relationships and the obligations we do or don't have to people who hurt us. Am I the bad person for refusing to help my dad financially? This is a question I never thought I'd be asking, but here I am. My father walked out on my mum and me when I was 10 years old. He said he wasn't ready to be a father and that he needed to find himself. What he actually found was a new girlfriend 3 states away, and we didn't hear from him for over 15 years. Growing up without him was hard. My mum worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and there were plenty of times when I wondered why my dad didn't love me enough to stay. I went to therapy as a teenager to work through the abandonment issues, and I thought I had made peace with the situation. I built a good life for myself without him. Last month, my dad reached out through Facebook. He found me and sent this long message about how he'd been thinking about me and wanted to reconnect. He said he knew he'd made mistakes, but hoped we could start fresh. Part of me was curious about what he had to say, so I agreed to meet him for coffee. When we met, he looked older and tired. He apologized for leaving and said he'd regretted it every day since. He told me about his life, how things didn't work out with the girlfriend he left us for, how he'd struggled with depression and made poor choices. He seemed genuinely remorseful, and I found myself feeling sorry for him. But then he got to the real reason he'd contacted me. He'd been diagnosed with a serious heart condition and needed surgery. His insurance would cover some of it, but he was looking at about $30,000 in medical bills that he couldn't afford. He'd burned bridges with most of his family over the years, and I was basically his last hope for help. He didn't directly ask me for money during that first meeting, but he made it clear that he was in a desperate situation. He mentioned that he'd heard I was doing well in my career and had bought a house. He said he was proud of me for making something of myself, despite his failures as a father. A few days later, he called me and asked outright if I could help him financially. He said he understood if I was angry with him, but that he was scared and didn't know where else to turn. He promised he would pay me back once he recovered and got back on his feet. I told him I needed time to think about it. The truth is, I do have some savings, and $30,000 wouldn't completely wipe me out. But the thought of giving him money made me feel sick, that this man abandoned me when I needed him most, and now he wanted me to rescue him when he needed me most. I talked to my mum about it, and she was furious that he'd even asked. She reminded me of all the times I'd cried asking why Daddy didn't come home, all the school events he missed, all the birthdays that passed without even a card. She said he'd made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. But I also talked to my therapist, who pointed out that helping him might give me closure and allow me to be the bigger person. She said that sometimes doing the right thing isn't about what someone deserves, but about who you want to be as a person. I went back and forth for weeks. Part of me wanted to help him because he seemed genuinely sorry and scared. Another part of me was angry that he thought he could waltz back into my life and expect me to solve his problems with money. Finally, I called him and told him I couldn't help him financially. I explained that while I forgave him for leaving, I wasn't comfortable taking on the responsibility of funding his medical care. I said he would need to find other options through charity programs or payment plans with the hospital. He was devastated. He started crying on the phone and said he understood why I was angry but begged me to reconsider. He said he was sorry for everything and that if I helped him through this, he would spend the rest of his life making it up to me. I held firm and told him my decision was final. He got angry then and said I was heartless for letting him suffer when I had the means to help. He accused me of punishing him for mistakes he made when I was a child and said that holding grudges would eat me alive. Since then, other family members have gotten involved. My paternal grandmother, who I barely know, called to guilt trip me about abandoning family in their time of need. Some cousins I haven't spoken to in years have reached out on social media to tell me I'm being cruel and vindictive. They all say the same thing, that family helps family no matter what, and that I'm being petty for bringing up old hurt when someone's life is on the line. They've made me feel like I'm somehow the villain in this situation for not opening my wallet to someone who walked away from me without looking back. My dad has been sending me texts every few days with updates about his declining health and how scared he is. He keeps saying that I'm his only hope and that he doesn't understand how I can be so cold. Each message makes me feel more guilty, but also more resentful. I know that if something happens to him and I could have prevented it, I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I also know that giving him this money feels like rewarding him for abandoning me and only coming back when he needed something. Some of my friends think I'm being too harsh and that I should help him because it's the compassionate thing to do. Others say he has no right to ask for anything after being absent for so long. I'm honestly torn between wanting to do the right thing and feeling like I don't owe him anything. Am I wrong for refusing to help my dad financially after he walked out on me as a child? Should I put aside my hurt and anger to help someone in a medical crisis, even if that person caused me years of pain? Or do I have the right to protect myself and my resources from someone who only reached out when they needed something? That story wraps up there. The manipulation is real with this one. Abandoning your child for 15 years and then showing up with your hand out when you need medical bills paid takes serious nerve. Just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean you owe them your life savings, especially when they couldn't be bothered to send a birthday card for over a decade. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to fund someone else's consequences. Let's move into another family inheritance drama that shows how money can turn siblings into strangers. Am I the bad person for keeping my inheritance? My grandmother passed away 6 months ago, and it's created a family war that I never saw coming. She left me her entire estate, which includes her house, about $50,000 in savings, and some valuable jewellery. The total value is probably around $200,000. My 2 siblings are furious because they were left out of the will completely. My brother Mark is 35, and my sister Lisa is 32. I'm the youngest at 29. They both have good jobs and own their own homes, while I've been struggling financially for years due to some bad career choices and student loan debt. The thing is, I was the only one who took care of our grandmother in her final years. When she started having health problems 3 years ago, Mark and Lisa were too busy with their own families and careers to help out much. They'd visit on holidays and maybe call once a month, but that was about it. I moved back to my hometown specifically to help take care of her. I gave up a job opportunity in another city because she needed someone nearby. I was there for every doctor's appointment, every hospital stay, every late night when she was scared or confused. I did her grocery shopping, managed her medications, and made sure she had companionship so she wouldn't feel alone. It wasn't easy. There were times when I resented having to put my life on hold while my siblings got to pursue their careers and build their families without worrying about Grandma's daily needs. But I loved her, and I couldn't stand the thought of her being in a nursing home when she wanted to stay in her own house. Mark and Lisa would occasionally send money or hire cleaning services, but they rarely visited unless it was for a major holiday. When I asked them to come help with bigger decisions about Grandma's care, they usually said they were too busy or that I seemed to have everything under control. When Grandma's dementia got worse in her final year, I basically became her full-time caregiver. I took a part-time job so I could be available during the day. My own relationship suffered because I was always stressed and exhausted. My girlfriend eventually left because she said she felt like she was competing with my grandmother for my attention. I knew Grandma was grateful for everything I was doing. She would tell me constantly how much she appreciated having me there and how worried she was about being a burden. I always reassured her that she wasn't a burden and that I was happy to help, which was mostly true even when it was really hard. After the funeral, the lawyer read the will and everyone was shocked. Grandma had left everything to me, with a note saying that I had sacrificed the most to take care of her and that she wanted to make sure I was financially secure. She mentioned my siblings by name, but said they had their own lives established and didn't need her help the way I did. Mark and Lisa immediately accused me of manipulating Grandma while she was vulnerable. They said I had taken advantage of her dementia to influence her decisions about the will. Lisa actually accused me of elder abuse and said she was going to contest the will in court. I was hurt that they would think I'd manipulate our grandmother for money. Yes, I knew she was grateful for my help, but I never asked her for anything or suggested she change her will. I took care of her because she was my grandmother and I loved her, not because I expected to inherit everything. The family divided quickly. Some relatives supported my siblings, saying the inheritance should be split equally, regardless of who provided more care. Others defended me, pointing out that I had given up years of my life to take care of Grandma while Mark and Lisa pursued their own interests. Mark's wife got involved and made things even worse. She started posting on social media about how I had stolen from my siblings and manipulated an elderly woman with dementia. She shared details about the inheritance and painted me as this greedy person who had isolated Grandma from the rest of the family. The truth is, I never isolated Grandma from anyone. Mark and Lisa could have visited more or helped more, but they chose not to. I sent them regular updates about her condition and invited them to doctor's appointments and family events. They just always had other priorities. Lisa hired a lawyer to contest the will, claiming that Grandma wasn't mentally competent when she made the changes. But Grandma had updated her will 2 years before her dementia got really bad, and her lawyer at the time had confirmed she was completely lucid and understood what she was doing. The legal battle has been expensive and emotionally draining. I've had to hire my own lawyer to defend the will, which has already cost me thousands of dollars. The stress of fighting with my siblings while still grieving our grandmother has been overwhelming. Some family friends have tried to mediate and suggested I share the inheritance voluntarily to keep peace in the family. They say that even if the will is legal, it's caused so much hurt that maybe I should consider splitting things 3 ways to preserve my relationships with my siblings. Part of me has considered it because I'm tired of the fighting and I miss having a relationship with Mark and Lisa. We used to be close, and now they won't even speak to me except through lawyers. But another part of me feels like giving in would be betraying Grandma's wishes and rewarding their neglect. The inheritance would be life-changing for me. I could pay off my student loans, put a down payment on a house, and finally have some financial security. For my siblings, it would be nice to have, but wouldn't fundamentally change their already comfortable lives. I keep thinking about all the times I wanted to go out with friends or pursue job opportunities, but stayed home to take care of Grandma instead. I remember the nights I spent in the hospital with her when she was scared and confused. Mark and Lisa weren't there for any of that, but now they want an equal share of the reward. The worst part is that this fighting is exactly what Grandma wouldn't have wanted. She always talked about how important family was and how proud she was that her grandchildren got along so well. She would be heartbroken to know that her death had torn us apart like this. My siblings keep saying that blood is thicker than water and that family should share equally in family wealth. But I feel like they're the ones who forgot about family when Grandma needed them most. They were content to let me handle everything alone, and now they want to benefit equally from her gratitude. The legal process is still ongoing, but my lawyer thinks the will is solid and that my siblings don't have much of a case. Still, the emotional damage to our family relationships might be permanent. Even if I keep the inheritance, I might lose my brother and sister forever. Sometimes I wonder if the money is worth destroying what's left of our family. But then I remember all the sacrifices I made and all the times my siblings chose their own convenience over grandma's needs. Maybe this is just the natural consequence of the choices we all made during her final years. That story ends there. This is one of those situations where actions have consequences, and some people don't like facing the results of their choices. OP spent years putting their life on hold to care for their grandmother, while the siblings sent occasional money and showed up for holidays. Now they want equal rewards for unequal effort. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote that will, and she had good reasons for it. Sometimes, love isn't measured in DNA, but in who actually shows up when it matters. Moving on to our next story about friendship boundaries and the cost of saying no to people who think they're entitled to your time. Am I the bad person for not babysitting my nephew? My sister Rachel has a 4-year-old son named Tyler, and she's been expecting me to babysit him every weekend for the past 6 months. What started as occasional help has turned into a regular obligation that I never actually agreed to, and I'm starting to resent it. Rachel is a single mum who works full-time during the week. I understand that parenting is hard and that she needs time to herself occasionally. When she first asked me to watch Tyler for a few hours so she could run errands or have a date night, I was happy to help. He's a good kid, and I enjoy spending time with him. But gradually, the requests became more frequent and the expectations became more demanding. What started as watching Tyler for 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon turned into keeping him overnight on weekends. Rachel would drop him off Friday evening and not pick him up until Sunday night, leaving me responsible for all his meals, entertainment, and care for the entire weekend. I work a demanding job during the week, and my weekends are usually when I catch up on household tasks, see my friends, or just relax. Having a 4-year-old every weekend means I can't make plans or have any downtime. Tyler is well behaved, but he's still a preschooler who needs constant attention and supervision. The final straw came 3 weeks ago when Rachel texted me on Friday afternoon, saying she was dropping Tyler off in an hour and would see me Sunday. She didn't ask if I was available or if I had other plans. She just assumed I would be there to take him like I always had been. The problem was that I had already made plans to go out of town with friends for the weekend. It was a trip we'd been planning for months, and I was really looking forward to it. When I called Rachel to tell her I wouldn't be able to watch Tyler, she completely freaked out. She said I was being selfish and unreliable. She had already made plans based on the assumption that I would babysit, and now she had to scramble to find other childcare at the last minute. She accused me of not caring about Tyler or understanding how hard single motherhood was. I tried to explain that I had never agreed to be Tyler's regular weekend babysitter and that she should have asked before assuming I was available. I pointed out that I had been helping her for months without compensation and that I was entitled to have my own life and make my own plans. Rachel got angry and said that family helps family without keeping score. She said Tyler loved spending time with me and that I was hurting him by suddenly becoming unavailable. She made me feel like I was abandoning both her and my nephew by wanting to have my own social life. I ended up cancelling my trip with my friends to watch Tyler that weekend because I felt guilty and didn't want to leave Rachel without childcare. But I was resentful the entire time and decided that things needed to change. The following week I called Rachel and told her that I could no longer be her regular weekend babysitter. I explained that I was happy to help occasionally in emergencies or special circumstances, but that I needed my weekends back for my own life. I suggested she look into hiring actual babysitters or finding other family members who could help. Rachel's reaction was explosive. She accused me of being a terrible aunt and said I was selfish for putting my own wants above Tyler's needs. She said she couldn't afford regular babysitters and that asking other family members wasn't fair because they had their own responsibilities. She also guilt-tripped me by saying that Tyler had been asking about me and wondering why he couldn't come stay with Aunt Sarah anymore. She made it sound like I was traumatizing a 4-year-old by establishing boundaries about my own time and availability. Our parents got involved when Rachel called them crying about how I had abandoned her and Tyler. They called me to try to mediate and suggested that maybe I could compromise by watching Tyler every other weekend instead of every weekend. I appreciate that they were trying to help, but I felt like they were missing the point. This wasn't about finding a compromise that worked for Rachel's schedule. This was about the fact that Rachel had turned what was supposed to be occasional help into a regular expectation without ever asking if that was okay with me. My mum said that Tyler was innocent in all this and that he shouldn't suffer because of adult disagreements. She pointed out that I don't have kids of my own, so I have more free time than Rachel does. She suggested that helping with Tyler was a way for me to contribute to the family. But I don't think having free time means I'm obligated to fill it with childcare duties for my sister. I work hard all week and I deserve to have my weekends for myself. I love Tyler, but I never chose to become a parent, and I shouldn't have to sacrifice my personal time just because Rachel decided to have a child. Rachel has been giving me the silent treatment for the past 3 weeks. She won't return my calls or texts, and she's been telling other family members that I'm selfish and unreliable. Some cousins and aunts have reached out to try to convince me to reconsider and help Rachel out. They all say the same thing about family helping family and about how Tyler needs stability and support from his extended family. They make me feel like I'm being cruel and selfish for wanting to have boundaries about babysitting. The worst part is that I do miss Tyler. He's a sweet kid, and I enjoyed our time together when it felt like a choice rather than an obligation. But Rachel has made it clear that she sees my help as something she's entitled to rather than something I'm choosing to give. I've started to wonder if I'm being too rigid about this. Maybe I should just accept that helping with Tyler is part of being a good sister, an aunt. But I also feel like if I give in now, Rachel will just go back to treating me like free childcare without any regard for my own needs or schedule. Some of my friends support my decision and say that Rachel was taking advantage of me. They point out that even if she can't afford regular babysitters, there are other options like trading childcare with other parents or finding community resources. But others think I'm being harsh and that family obligations sometimes require sacrifice. I'm torn between wanting to help my sister and nephew and wanting to maintain some control over my own life. I don't want Tyler to suffer because of this conflict, but I also don't want to enable Rachel's expectation that I should be available whenever she needs me. Am I wrong for refusing to continue being my nephew's regular weekend babysitter? Should I put my sister's needs as a single mother above my own desire for personal time? Or do I have the right to set boundaries about how much childcare I'm willing to provide, even if it creates family drama? That story comes to an end right there. Rachel really thought she could just claim her sister's entire weekend every week without even asking. Free babysitting for a few hours is a favour, but signing someone up to be a weekend parent without their consent is just entitlement. Being a single mum is hard, but that doesn't give you the right to voluntarily assign other people parenting duties. Sometimes, helping family means knowing when to stop enabling their unrealistic expectations. Our next story dives into the murky waters of roommate relationships and the gross realities of shared living spaces. Am I the bad person for throwing out my roommate's food? I live with my roommate Jake in a small 2-bedroom apartment. We've been living together for about 8 months, and overall it's been fine except for one major issue that finally came to a head last week. Jake has this habit of buying groceries and then completely forgetting about them. He'll stock the refrigerator with fruits, vegetables, leftovers, and various perishables, and then just leave them there until they rot. I'm talking about food that sits in our fridge for weeks until it's growing mold and smelling up the entire kitchen. At first, I tried to be understanding. Everyone forgets about food sometimes, and I figured it was just an adjustment period as we learnt to live together. I would occasionally remind him about items that were getting old, but he would just say he'd get to them later and then never actually throw them out. The problem got worse over time. Our refrigerator started smelling terrible because of all the rotting food. I couldn't open the door without being hit with this awful odour of decomposing vegetables and spoiled leftovers. It was affecting my ability to store my own food safely because the smell would transfer to everything else in there. I started taking photos of the expired food and sending them to Jake with messages asking when he planned to clean it out. He would always respond that he'd take care of it soon, but days would pass and nothing would happen. The mouldy food would just sit there getting worse, while I had to deal with the smell and the fruit flies that started appearing in our kitchen. 3 weeks ago, I found a container of leftover pasta that had been in the fridge for over a month. It was completely covered in green and black mould and smelled like death when I accidentally opened it. I immediately threw it away and told Jake that we needed to establish some rules about food storage and cleanup. Jake got defensive and said he was planning to eat that pasta and that I had no right to throw away his food without asking. I pointed out that food covered in mould is not safe to eat and that leaving it in our shared refrigerator was creating health hazards for both of us. He insisted that some of the food I thought was bad was actually still fine. We agreed that we would each be responsible for monitoring our own food and throwing things out before they spoiled. I thought this would solve the problem, but Jake continued his same habits. More mouldy vegetables appeared, more containers of rotten leftovers accumulated, and the smell in our kitchen got even worse. Last week I reached my breaking point. I opened the refrigerator to put away some groceries and was overwhelmed by the stench. There were at least 6 containers of Jake's food that were clearly spoiled, including some chicken that looked like it had been there for at least 2 weeks and vegetables that were completely liquefied. I couldn't take it anymore. I gathered up all of Jake's expired and mouldy food and threw it in the garbage. I cleaned out the entire refrigerator with bleach solution to get rid of the smell and the potential bacteria. It took me over an hour to make our kitchen functional again. When Jake came home and saw what I'd done, he absolutely lost it. He started yelling about how I had thrown away hundreds of dollars worth of food and that I had no right to make decisions about his belongings. He said some of that food was still perfectly good and that I had wasted money that he couldn't afford to lose. I tried to show him photos I'd taken of the mouldy, rotten mess, but he insisted that I was being overly cautious and that food doesn't go bad as quickly as I think it does. He actually said that he'd eaten food in worse condition than what I'd thrown away and that I was being wasteful and controlling. He demanded that I reimburse him for the food I'd thrown away, claiming it was worth about $200. I refused and told him that I wasn't going to pay for rotten food that was creating health hazards in our shared living space. I pointed out that I'd warned him multiple times and that he'd had weeks to clean out his own expired items. Jake has been passive-aggressive ever since, making comments about how I think I'm better than him and that I'm trying to control how he lives. He started keeping some of his food in a mini fridge in his bedroom, which I actually think is a great solution, but he acts like it's this huge inconvenience that he shouldn't have to deal with. Our mutual friends are divided on the situation. Some think I was right to throw out food that was clearly spoiled and creating unsanitary conditions. Others think I should have given Jake one more warning or found a way to make him deal with it himself instead of taking matters into my own hands. Jake has been telling people that I'm obsessively clean and that I threw away perfectly good food because I'm controlling and wasteful. He's painted me as this unreasonable roommate who can't tolerate normal levels of mess. But there's a difference between normal mess and food safety hazards. I've started wondering if I should have handled this differently. Maybe I should have given him an ultimatum first, like clean out your food by this date or I'll throw it away. But I'd already been asking him to deal with it for weeks and nothing had changed. The smell was affecting my quality of life and potentially creating health risks for both of us. I couldn't continue living with rotting food in our shared refrigerator just because Jake couldn't be bothered to clean up after himself. But now he's acting like I'm the villain for maintaining basic sanitary standards in our kitchen. Some people have suggested that we need better communication and compromise about household standards, but I don't think there should be room for compromise when it comes to food safety. Mouldy food that's been sitting around for weeks isn't a matter of different cleanliness standards, it's a health hazard. That story ends there. Jake really tried to gaslight OP into thinking mouldy chicken and liquefied vegetables were still edible. Some battles aren't about control or different standards, they're about basic health and safety. When your roommate turns a shared fridge into a science experiment, throwing out the biohazards isn't being controlling, it's being responsible. Nobody should have to negotiate with someone about whether month-old pasta covered in mould needs to go in the trash. Let's dive into another story about family expectations and the price of setting boundaries with people who think your success belongs to them. Am I the bad person for refusing to lend my car? My brother Danny has been asking to borrow my car for months, and I keep saying no. He thinks I'm being unfair and selfish, but I have good reasons for not wanting to lend it to him anymore. 2 years ago, Danny asked if he could borrow my car for a weekend trip with his friends. His own car was in the shop, and he said he really needed reliable transportation. I said yes because I wasn't using it that weekend, and I wanted to help him out. I figured it was what brothers do for each other. When he brought the car back, there was a huge dent in the passenger side door, and scratches along the paint. Danny claimed he had no idea how it happened, and suggested that maybe someone hit it in a parking lot while they were inside somewhere. He said he was really sorry and offered to pay for the repairs. I got an estimate, and the damage was going to cost about $1,500 to fix properly. Danny said he would take care of it, but then he started making excuses about not having the money right away. He asked if we could work out a payment plan where he gave me a little bit each month until it was paid off. I agreed because I figured he was being responsible by acknowledging the debt and trying to make it right. But months went by, and Danny only made a few small payments before he stopped altogether. When I asked him about it, he said he was having financial problems and couldn't afford the payments right then. Eventually, I just paid for the repairs myself because I was tired of driving around with a damaged car. Danny never finished paying me back, and he acted like the whole thing wasn't a big deal since I could afford to fix it anyway. He said I was being petty for keeping track of money between brothers. Since then, Danny has asked to borrow my car several more times for various reasons. His car breaks down frequently. He needs something reliable for job interviews. He wants to impress a date. There's always some reason why he needs my car instead of his own. Each time I say no and remind him that he still owes me money from the last time he damaged it. Danny gets frustrated and says I'm holding a grudge over an accident that happened years ago. He points out that I have a newer, more reliable car than his, and that lending it to him occasionally wouldn't hurt me. He says that's what family's supposed to do, help each other out when needed. But it's not just about the money he owes me, though that's certainly part of it. I've noticed that Danny is generally irresponsible with other people's belongings. He's borrowed tools from our dad and returned them damaged or not returned them at all. He's borrowed clothes from friends and gotten stains on them or lost them entirely. My car is one of my most valuable possessions, and I worked hard to afford it. I take good care of it, keep up with maintenance, and I need it to be reliable for my job and daily life. The idea of letting Danny use it again makes me anxious because I know there's a good chance something will happen to it. Last month, Danny's car completely broke down, and he said he needed to borrow mine for job interviews. He promised he would be extra careful and that he really needed this opportunity to get back on his feet financially. He said if I helped him get this job, he'd be able to pay me back for the previous damage. I still said no, and Danny got really upset. He said I was sabotaging his attempts to improve his life and that I was being selfish for not helping family when I easily could. He accused me of caring more about my car than about his well-being and future prospects. Our parents got involved when Danny complained to them about my refusal to help. They called me and suggested that maybe I should lend him the car for just the job interviews, since employment was so important for his stability. They said holding on to past grievances wasn't healthy and that brothers should support each other. I explained about the previous damage and how Danny never finished paying me back, but they said that was ancient history and that I should focus on helping him move forward. They made me feel like I was being vindictive and small-minded for not wanting to risk my car being damaged again. Danny has been telling extended family members that I refused to help him when he was trying to get a job, and several relatives have reached out to suggest I reconsider. They all emphasize how important employment is and how family should stick together during hard times. They make it sound like I'm preventing him from improving his life over something trivial, but I don't think it's trivial. My car represents a significant financial investment, and it's essential for my own work and responsibilities. Danny has proven that he's not careful with borrowed items, and that he doesn't follow through on promises to pay for damage. Why should I risk my property based on his assurances when he's already broken those promises before? I've offered alternative solutions, like helping him research public transportation options for interviews, or offering to drive him to a few appointments myself, if my schedule allows. But Danny says those alternatives aren't convenient enough, and that borrowing my car would be much easier for everyone. The pressure from family has been intense, and I'm starting to second-guess my decision. Maybe I am being too rigid about this. Maybe I should give Danny another chance, and trust that he'll be more careful this time. But then I remember the $1,500 I had to pay for repairs and his casual attitude about not paying me back. Some friends think I'm being reasonable for protecting my property and not enabling Danny's irresponsible behaviour. They say that lending money or valuable items to family members often ends badly, and that I have every right to say no. Others think family relationships are more important than material possessions, and that I should help Danny even if there's some financial risk. I keep wondering if I'm being too harsh, or if I'm justified in protecting myself from someone who's already proven unreliable. Is it wrong to expect people to take responsibility for damage they cause before trusting them again? Or should I prioritize helping my brother over protecting my own interests? That story ends right there. Danny really thought he could wreck someone's car, bail on paying for it, and then expect to borrow it again whenever he needed a favour. The family pressure is classic too, acting like OP is selfish for remembering that actions have consequences. Some people confuse being family with having unlimited access to your stuff, regardless of how they've treated it before. Trust isn't automatically restored just because someone needs something from you. Moving on to our next story about workplace relationships and the uncomfortable reality that some people only see you as useful when they need something. Am I the bad person for not helping my coworker move? I work in a small office with about 12 people, and we generally get along well. My coworker Brian and I have what I thought was a friendly relationship. We chat about weekend plans, grab lunch together sometimes, and generally have good working chemistry on projects. 3 weeks ago, Brian mentioned that he was moving to a new apartment and was stressed about the logistics of it all. He was complaining about how expensive moving companies are and how he wasn't sure he could afford professional movers for his one-bedroom apartment. I made some sympathetic comments about how moving is always a hassle. A few days later, Brian asked if I might be available to help him move on Saturday. He said he'd already rented a truck and just needed some people to help load and unload boxes and furniture. He offered to buy pizza and beer for anyone who helped, which seemed like a fair trade for a few hours of work. I told him I'd probably be able to help, and to let me know the details as it got closer. I didn't make any firm commitments, but I figured spending a Saturday helping a coworker move wouldn't be too bad. Brian seemed really grateful and said it meant a lot that I was willing to help out. As the weekend approached, I started feeling less enthusiastic about giving up my Saturday to help Brian move. I'd had a really stressful week at work and was looking forward to just relaxing and taking care of some personal errands. I realised I hadn't actually promised definitively to help, just said I probably could. On Friday, Brian reminded me about the move and asked what time I could be there Saturday morning. He said he was planning to start early, around 7 a.m, to beat the heat and get everything done in one day. The early start time made the whole thing seem even less appealing to me. That evening, I decided I just didn't want to spend my weekend helping Brian move. I wasn't obligated to do it, and I really needed a day to myself to recharge and handle my own responsibilities. I texted Brian that I was sorry, but something had come up and I wouldn't be able to help with the move after all. Brian responded asking what had come up and if there was any way I could still help for even a few hours. I didn't want to lie about having specific plans, but I also didn't want to admit that I just didn't feel like doing it anymore. I said I had some family stuff to deal with and wouldn't be available. Saturday came and I spent the day doing exactly what I wanted to do. I slept in, went for a long walk, cleaned my apartment, and just enjoyed having unscheduled time to myself. I felt a little guilty knowing Brian was probably struggling with the move, but I also felt good about prioritizing my own needs for once. When I got to work on Monday, Brian was clearly upset with me. He was polite but cold, giving short answers when I tried to make conversation and avoiding me during lunch breaks. I could tell he was angry about me bailing on the move, but I wasn't sure how to address it. By Wednesday, Brian's attitude hadn't improved and it was starting to affect our work dynamics. We had to collaborate on a project and he was being uncooperative and passive-aggressive. I finally asked him if we could talk privately about what was bothering him. Brian told me he was disappointed that I'd left him hanging when he really needed help. He said he'd had to scramble to find other people at the last minute and ended up having to pay for professional movers for some of the heavy furniture because he didn't have enough helpers. He said my backing out had cost him extra money he couldn't really afford. I apologized for the inconvenience but pointed out that I'd never made a firm commitment to help and that things sometimes come up unexpectedly. I said I understood he was frustrated, but that I hadn't intentionally tried to leave him in a difficult situation. Brian said that when someone says they'll probably be able to help, it's reasonable to count on them unless there's a real emergency. He felt like I'd made a commitment and then broken it for selfish reasons. He accused me of not caring about our friendship and only thinking about my own convenience. I tried to explain that I'd had a really rough week and needed the weekend to recover, but Brian said everyone has rough weeks, and that's not an excuse for letting people down. He said if I hadn't wanted to help, I should have said no from the beginning, instead of leading him on. The tension between us has been affecting other people in the office. Our manager asked if there was a problem because our usual collaborative dynamic had completely disappeared. Some co-workers have picked up on the awkwardness and have asked what's going on between Brian and me. I've been wondering if I handled this situation poorly. Maybe I should have been more definitive about whether I could help instead of giving a vague answer. Maybe I should have sucked it up and helped him, even though I didn't feel like it. But I also think I had the right to change my mind about how to spend my weekend. Some friends think Brian is overreacting and that I wasn't obligated to help him move just because I said I probably could. They say that helping someone move is a big favour and that I had every right to decide I didn't want to do it. Others think I should have honoured what Brian perceived as a commitment, especially since he was counting on me. The worst part is that this situation has damaged what I thought was a good working relationship. Brian clearly feels betrayed and let down, while I feel like he's being unreasonable about the whole thing. We still have to work together, but the easy friendship we had before is gone. I keep going back and forth about whether I should apologise again or try to make it up to him somehow. Maybe I should offer to help him with something else, or buy him lunch to smooth things over. But part of me feels like apologising would be admitting I did something wrong when I think I had the right to prioritise my own needs. Am I wrong for backing out of helping Brian move when he was counting on my help? Should I have honoured what he saw as a commitment, even though I never definitively promised anything? Or do I have the right to decide how to spend my own time without owing elaborate explanations or dealing with people who feel entitled to your time and energy? That story wraps up right there. Brian really thought he could count someone's probably as a binding contract and then punish them professionally when it didn't work out. Helping someone move is a huge favour that requires an entire day of physical labour, not something you owe a co-worker just because you're friendly at the office. The passive-aggressive workplace drama afterward just proves OP made the right call about not wanting to do someone a favour who clearly keeps score. about everything. Let's move into our next story about family traditions and what happens when you refuse to play along with expectations that don't serve you. Am I the bad person for bringing my own food to Thanksgiving? I have several food allergies and dietary restrictions that my family has never really taken seriously. Every year at Thanksgiving, I end up sitting at the table with basically nothing I can eat while everyone else enjoys the meal. I'm allergic to dairy, eggs, and gluten, which rules out most traditional Thanksgiving dishes. The stuffing has bread, the mashed potatoes have butter and milk, the green bean casserole has cream of mushroom soup, and even the turkey gets basted with butter. I've explained this to my family multiple times over the years. My mum always says she'll try to accommodate me, but then Thanksgiving rolls around and there's nothing I can safely eat, except maybe some plain vegetables if I'm lucky. She'll point to a salad that has cheese on it and act like I'm being difficult when I explain that I can't eat it. For the past few years, I've just accepted going hungry or filling up on bread rolls beforehand and then eating a real meal when I got home. It was frustrating, but I didn't want to cause family drama over food. I figured it was easier to just deal with it than to keep explaining my dietary needs. This year, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I spent the whole day before Thanksgiving cooking dishes that I could actually eat. I made dairy-free mashed sweet potatoes, stuffing with gluten-free bread, green beans with olive oil instead of cream sauce, and even brought my own dessert. I packed everything up in containers and brought it with me to my aunt's house where we were having dinner. When I walked in with my bags of food, my mum immediately asked what I was doing. I explained that I'd brought some dishes I could eat so I wouldn't have to sit there hungry. The reaction was not what I expected. My mum looked embarrassed and said it was rude of me to bring outside food when my aunt had spent days cooking for everyone. My aunt seemed confused and a little hurt, asking if there was something wrong with the food she'd prepared. I tried to explain about my allergies and dietary restrictions, but my uncle jumped in and said that people nowadays are too picky about food, and that when he was growing up, you ate what was put in front of you. He said I was being disrespectful to the host by rejecting her hospitality. My cousin Sarah, who's always been competitive with me, made some snide comment about how I always have to make everything about myself and be the centre of attention. She said I was probably faking half my food issues anyway, and just wanted to seem special and different. My aunt tried to be diplomatic and said I was welcome to eat whatever I brought, but that she wished I'd talked to her beforehand so she could have prepared something for me. She seemed genuinely hurt that I hadn't trusted her to accommodate my needs, even though she'd never successfully done so in previous years. The worst part was that my own food looked and smelled really good, and several family members started asking if they could try some of my dishes. My gluten-free stuffing was actually more flavourful than the traditional version, and my sweet potato dish was getting compliments from people who usually stick to regular mashed potatoes. This just made the original complainers more upset. My mum said I was showing off and trying to prove that my food was better than everyone else's. She accused me of deliberately upstaging my aunt and making her feel bad about her cooking abilities. The tension at dinner was thick. People kept making passive-aggressive comments about how some people can't just be grateful for what they're given, and how family gatherings used to be simpler before everyone had special dietary needs. My younger brother, who's usually pretty supportive, even said that maybe I could have just eaten before coming or brought a small snack instead of what looked like an entire alternative meal. He said it did seem kind of rude to basically reject everything the host had prepared. But here's the thing that really frustrated me. While all this drama was happening, I was actually able to eat and enjoy Thanksgiving dinner for the first time in years. I had food I could safely consume, it tasted good, and I didn't have to sit there feeling left out while everyone else ate. Several family members who tried my dishes said they were delicious and asked for recipes. My teenage niece, who has recently developed some food sensitivities herself, thanked me for bringing alternatives and said it made her feel less alone about having dietary restrictions. After dinner, my mum pulled me aside and said I'd embarrassed her and made the whole family uncomfortable. She said that if I couldn't eat the regular food, I should have just stayed home. instead of creating drama. She accused me of being selfish and inconsiderate of other people's feelings. I tried to explain that I'd spent years going hungry at family gatherings and that bringing my own food was the most practical solution. I pointed out that I hadn't complained about anyone else's cooking or made a big deal about my restrictions. I just quietly brought food I could eat. But my mum said that by bringing outside food, I was implicitly criticising my aunt's cooking and making everyone else feel bad about not accommodating me properly. She said family gatherings are supposed to be about togetherness, not about individual dietary preferences. The drive home was uncomfortable, with my mum giving me the silent treatment and my dad trying to mediate by saying everyone was probably overreacting. My brother texted me later saying he understood why I did it, but that maybe I could have handled it more diplomatically. I've been getting mixed reactions from extended family members since then. Some people think I was smart to solve my own problem and that everyone else overreacted. Others think I was rude to the host and should have found a different solution. My aunt texted me a few days later saying she wasn't upset about the food, but that she wished we could have worked together to plan something I could eat. She said she felt bad that I'd been going hungry at family gatherings for years without her realising how serious my dietary restrictions were. I'm torn because I don't regret being able to actually eat at Thanksgiving for once, but I also didn't mean to hurt anyone's feelings or create family drama. I just wanted to participate in the meal instead of sitting there watching everyone else eat. Some friends think my family was being unreasonable and that bringing your own food when you have serious allergies is completely normal. Others think I should have communicated better beforehand or found a more diplomatic way to handle the situation. Was I wrong to bring my own food to Thanksgiving dinner? Should I have continued going hungry to avoid hurt feelings, or was I right to take care of my own dietary needs, even if it made others uncomfortable? That story comes to an end there. The family really made OP feel guilty for not wanting to go hungry at their own Thanksgiving dinner. Years of empty promises about accommodation, but the moment they solve their own problem, suddenly they're the villain for not trusting a process that had failed them repeatedly. The fact that other people wanted to try the food just proves how silly the whole drama was in the first place. Moving forward to our next story about financial boundaries in relationships and what happens when one person decides money shouldn't matter between partners. Am I the bad person for asking my partner to pay rent? I've been living with my partner Alex for 8 months now, and I'm at my breaking point financially. When Alex first started staying over regularly, it was supposed to be temporary while they figured out their living situation. But temporary has turned into permanent, and I'm still covering all the housing costs alone. At first, I didn't mind because Alex was only here a few nights a week and still had their own place. But gradually, they started spending more and more time here until they were basically living here full time. Their stuff migrated into my closets. They started getting mail delivered here, and they even gave my address to their employer for tax documents. The problem is that Alex has never contributed financially to rent, utilities, groceries, or any of the household expenses. I'm paying $1,500 a month for rent alone, plus utilities that have gone up significantly since Alex moved in. The water bill doubled because of longer showers and more laundry. The electric bill increased from running the air conditioning more often, and don't even get me started on the grocery costs. Alex works full-time and makes decent money as a graphic designer, so it's not like they can't afford to contribute. But whenever I've tried to bring up the topic of splitting expenses, they get defensive and say that relationships shouldn't be about money. They act like asking for financial help is somehow unromantic or transactional. 3 months ago, I sat Alex down for a serious conversation about finances. I explained that I was struggling to cover all the household expenses on my own and that it would help if we could split the rent and utilities. I wasn't asking them to pay half of everything retroactively, just to start contributing going forward. Alex's response was that they hadn't asked to move in and that I'd invited them to stay. They said that since it was my apartment originally, I should continue being responsible for the major expenses. They offered to occasionally buy groceries or pay for dinner out, but they didn't think they should have to pay rent for a place that wasn't officially theirs. I tried to explain that when someone lives somewhere full-time, they should contribute to the costs regardless of whose name is on the lease. Alex argued that they were just staying with me as my partner, and that asking for rent money felt like I was treating them as a tenant rather than as someone I loved. The situation got worse when Alex started inviting friends over regularly without checking with me first. They'd host dinner parties and game nights at my apartment, running up the utilities and leaving messes that I had to clean up. When I pointed out that they were treating my place like their own home, they said that's what happens when you're in a serious relationship. Last month, I gave Alex an ultimatum. I said they needed to start contributing $400 a month to help with rent and utilities, or they needed to find their own place. I explained that I couldn't continue subsidizing their living expenses when I had my own financial goals and responsibilities. Alex completely freaked out. They accused me of trying to monetize our relationship and said that people who truly love each other don't keep financial score. They said that if I cared more about money than our relationship, maybe we weren't compatible after all. They also brought up times when they'd paid for dinners or bought me gifts, claiming that they had been contributing financially, just in different ways. But occasional restaurant meals don't compare to covering someone's housing costs for 8 months straight. Alex started giving me the silent treatment and making passive-aggressive comments about how I was being materialistic and cold. They said they felt hurt that I was treating them like a burden instead of appreciating that they wanted to spend time with me. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the money itself, but about fairness and respect. When you benefit from someone's housing expenses, utilities, and household costs, contributing financially is the responsible adult thing to do. It's not romantic to let your partner struggle financially while you save money by living rent-free. Alex's friends got involved when they complained to them about our argument. Several of them reached out to me, saying that I was being unreasonable and that relationships require sacrifice and compromise. They made it sound like I was being selfish for expecting financial contribution from someone I supposedly loved. But my friends were supportive and said that Alex was taking advantage of me. They pointed out that 8 months of free housing is a significant financial benefit and that any reasonable person would offer to help with costs. They said Alex's reaction proved they were more interested in a free place to live than in being a fair partner. The tension in our relationship has been building for weeks. Alex still hasn't agreed to pay rent, but they also haven't made any moves to find their own place. They seem to think that if they ignore the issue long enough, I'll just give up and continue covering everything myself. Meanwhile, I'm getting more resentful every time I pay the bills, or see Alex using my utilities without contributing. I feel taken advantage of and frustrated that someone who claims to love me is comfortable letting me struggle financially while they benefit. Alex finally said they might be willing to pay $200 a month, but they want it to be considered a gift rather than rent. They don't want to feel obligated or like they owe me anything. They said $400 was too much and that I was trying to profit off our relationship. I told them that $200 doesn't even cover the increase in utilities since they moved in, let alone contribute meaningfully to rent. I also said that calling it a gift defeats the entire purpose, which is establishing that they have financial responsibility for the place where they live. The whole situation has made me question our compatibility. If Alex can't see why contributing to shared living expenses is fair and reasonable, what does that say about how they view partnership and mutual responsibility? But they keep saying that focusing on money is ruining our relationship and that I'm prioritizing finances over love. Am I wrong for asking my partner to contribute financially to the household expenses? Should I continue covering everything to avoid conflict? Or am I right to expect someone who lives here full-time to help with the costs? That story ends right there. Alex really thought they could live somewhere rent-free for 8 months and then act like asking for basic financial contribution was somehow ruining romance. The mental gymnastics of claiming they didn't ask to move in, while simultaneously taking over closet space and getting mail delivered there is impressive. When someone benefits from your housing costs every single day, but thinks contributing money would make things too transactional, they're basically admitting they prefer being financially supported to being an equal partner. Our next story takes us into the complicated world of family loyalty and what happens when supporting someone means enabling their poor choices. Am I the bad person for not attending my dad's second wedding? My father is getting married next month to the woman he had an affair with while he was still married to my mum. He's furious that I won't be there, but I can't bring myself to celebrate this relationship that destroyed my family. My parents were married for 22 years when my dad started acting strange. He was working late constantly, going on business trips that seemed unnecessary, and being secretive about his phone and computer. My mum suspected something was wrong, but tried to trust him when he said everything was fine. The truth came out when my mum found hotel receipts and credit card statements showing expenses for 2 people during my dad's supposed solo work trips. When she confronted him, he admitted he'd been seeing his co-worker Linda for about 6 months. He said he was unhappy in his marriage and had fallen in love with someone else. My mum was devastated. She'd spent over 2 decades building a life with this man, raising his children, supporting his career moves, and believing they had a strong partnership. Finding out he'd been lying and cheating for months while she worried about their relationship was crushing. My dad moved out immediately and filed for divorce. He didn't even try counselling or working on the marriage. He said he'd realised he wanted to be with Linda and that staying married to my mum would be unfair to everyone. He acted like he was being noble by ending things quickly, instead of dragging out an unhappy marriage. The divorce was messy and bitter. My dad fought my mum on everything from alimony to asset division. He claimed that since he was the primary earner, he deserved to keep more of their shared assets. He even tried to argue that my mum hadn't contributed equally to their financial success because she'd worked part-time to focus on raising their children. Throughout this entire process, my dad expected my brother and me to be understanding about his decision. He said that sometimes marriages end and that we were adults who should be able to handle our parents getting divorced. He wanted us to meet Linda and give their relationship a chance. I told my dad that I wasn't ready to meet the woman who'd helped destroy my parents' marriage. He got angry and said that Linda wasn't responsible for the problems in his marriage, that those issues existed long before she came along. He accused me of being unfair to Linda and taking my mum's side without considering his perspective. But here's the thing that really bothered me. My dad had never mentioned being unhappy in his marriage before the affair started. He'd seemed content with my mum. They'd gone on vacations together, celebrated anniversaries, talked about retirement plans. The unhappiness story only emerged after he got caught cheating. Linda left her own husband around the same time, and she and my dad moved in together within months of their divorces being finalised. They seemed to think that everyone should just accept their relationship and move on from the messiness of how it started. My mum struggled emotionally and financially after the divorce. She'd given up career advancement opportunities to support my dad's job and raise their children, and now she was starting over at 50 with limited work experience. My dad's new relationship flourished while my mum dealt with depression and anxiety about her future. When my dad announced his engagement to Linda last year, I told him I was happy if he was happy, but that I wouldn't be attending the wedding. I explained that while I wanted him to be happy, I couldn't celebrate a relationship that had caused so much pain to my mother and disrupted our family. My dad was shocked and hurt. He said that Linda made him happy in ways he'd never experienced before, and that I was being stubborn and vindictive by refusing to support his new marriage. He accused me of punishing him for falling in love, and said that children should want their parents to be happy. I tried to explain that it wasn't about punishing him or preventing his happiness. It was about the fact that their relationship had started as an affair that devastated my mother and broke up our family. Attending their wedding would feel like endorsing the way their relationship began and the pain it caused. My dad said that holding grudges about the past would only hurt me in the long run. He pointed out that he and Linda were going to be married whether I attended or not, and that my absence would just create permanent damage to our relationship. He said that sometimes people fall in love unexpectedly, and that judging him for following his heart was unfair. Linda has tried to reach out to me several times, saying she understands why I might have mixed feelings, but hoping we could build a relationship going forward. She's emphasised that she and my dad are happy together and that she wants to be part of our family. She seems genuinely confused about why I can't just accept their relationship. My brother is attending the wedding, saying that he wants to maintain a relationship with our dad and that boycotting the wedding would just create more family drama. He thinks I'm being too rigid and that I should separate my feelings about how their relationship started from my desire to have a relationship with our father. Extended family members are divided. Some think I should attend to keep peace and show support for my dad's happiness. Others understand why I can't bring myself to celebrate a relationship that began with betrayal and deception. My mum has stayed out of it completely, saying it's my decision to make. My dad has been calling me regularly, alternating between trying to guilt trip me into attending and getting angry about my continued refusal. He says that if I don't come to his wedding, our relationship will never be the same. He's essentially giving me an ultimatum: support his marriage or lose his presence in my life. The wedding is 3 weeks away and the pressure is intensifying. My dad's family thinks I'm being cruel and unforgiving. Some of my friends think I should just go to maintain family relationships, while others support my decision to set boundaries about what I'm comfortable celebrating. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh and stubborn about this. Maybe I should just attend the wedding and try to move forward for the sake of family harmony. But another part of me feels like attending would be betraying my own values and my empathy for my mother's pain. I keep thinking about my mum crying when she found out about the affair, and how my dad seemed more concerned about defending his new relationship than acknowledging the hurt he'd caused. I can't shake the feeling that celebrating this marriage would be celebrating the destruction of my parents' marriage. Am I wrong for refusing to attend my dad's second wedding? Should I put family relationships above my personal feelings about how his new relationship started? Or do I have the right to set boundaries about what I'm comfortable celebrating, even if it damages my relationship with my father? That story wraps up there. Dad really thought he could blow up a 22-year marriage through infidelity and then demand his children celebrate the relationship that caused all the destruction. The audacity of fighting mom on alimony while expecting the kids to play happy family with his affair partner is staggering. Some relationships deserve to have consequences, and refusing to celebrate a marriage built on betrayal isn't vindictive, it's having standards. Let's move into our final story about personal space and what happens when your partner decides your home should reflect their vision instead of yours. Am I the bad person for not letting my partner redecorate? My partner Sam and I have been together for a year, and they've been staying at my apartment more and more frequently. I love having them here, but we're starting to clash over how my living space should look and feel. I'm someone who prefers a clean, minimalist aesthetic. I like having clear surfaces, neutral colours, and just the essentials visible. My apartment is small, so keeping things simple and uncluttered makes it feel more spacious and peaceful. I've worked hard to create an environment that feels calm and organised. Sam has completely different taste. They love bold colours, lots of decorative objects, plants everywhere, artwork covering the walls, and what they call a lived-in feel. Their own place looks like an eclectic art gallery mixed with a greenhouse, and while I can appreciate that style in their space, it's not what I want for mine. The conflict started small. Sam brought over a few plants and some colourful throw pillows, saying they wanted to add some life and personality to my place. I appreciated the gesture, but explained that I preferred keeping things simple. I suggested they could redecorate their own place however they wanted, but that my apartment worked better for me with minimal decoration. Sam seemed hurt and said my place felt cold and impersonal, like a hotel room rather than a home. They said that if we were going to spend more time together here, it should feel welcoming and reflect both of our personalities. They accused me of being controlling about my space and not willing to compromise. Over the next few weeks, Sam kept bringing more items over. Colourful artwork for the walls, decorative bowls and candles for the coffee table, more plants for every available surface, and even some furniture pieces they thought would make the space more comfortable. Each time, I'd ask them to take the items back to their place. This created tension because Sam felt like I was rejecting their attempts to contribute to our shared living space. They said that if we were serious about our relationship, we should be able to blend our styles and create a space that felt like home to both of us. They accused me of prioritizing my aesthetic preferences over our relationship. I tried to explain that my living space is important to my mental health and stress levels. I work from home frequently, and having a calm, organized environment helps me focus and feel relaxed. Clutter and visual chaos make me feel anxious and overwhelmed, which affects my productivity and mood. Sam said I was being dramatic, and that a few decorative items wouldn't hurt anyone. They pointed out that their additions were actually nice quality pieces that most people would consider improvements. They seemed to think my resistance was about not liking their taste, rather than about preferring simplicity. The situation escalated when I came home from a work trip to find that Sam had redecorated my living room while I was away. They'd hung artwork on the walls, arranged plants throughout the space, added colourful textiles to the furniture, and completely changed the feel of the room. They were excited to show me their surprise and thought I'd be pleased with the transformation. I was not pleased. I felt like my personal space had been violated and that Sam had completely disregarded my clearly stated preferences about how I wanted my home to look. The room felt chaotic and overwhelming to me, and I couldn't relax in what had been my peaceful sanctuary. When I asked Sam to remove the decorations and return my living room to its original state, they were devastated. They said they'd spent hours making the space more beautiful and welcoming, and that my reaction was hurtful and ungrateful. They accused me of caring more about my aesthetic than about their efforts to improve our shared environment. Sam started crying and said that my apartment never felt like a place where they belonged, that it was always clearly my space that they were just visiting. They said that refusing to let them add personal touches made them feel unwelcome and unimportant in my life. I felt bad about hurting Sam's feelings, but I also felt angry that they'd gone ahead and redecorated without asking. I explained that this was my home, my lease, my mortgage, and my sanctuary from work stress. I said that while I loved having them here, that didn't give them the right to change my living space against my wishes. Sam said that if we were going to have a serious relationship, we needed to be able to compromise on things like home decoration. They pointed out that they spend almost as much time here as I do, and that they should have some say in how the space looks and feels. We've been arguing about this for weeks now. Sam keeps bringing up the decorating issue and saying that my unwillingness to compromise shows that I don't see them as a true partner. They've accused me of being selfish and controlling about my space. I've tried to suggest alternatives, like Sam decorating their bedroom area at their place however they want, or us looking for a new apartment together where we could both have input from the beginning. But Sam says that's not the same, and that I should be willing to make changes to accommodate their needs too. Some of our friends think I'm being too rigid, and that relationships require give and take. They say that letting Sam add a few personal touches wouldn't kill me, and that I should prioritise their comfort over my aesthetic preferences. Others think Sam was wrong to redecorate without permission, and that everyone deserves to feel comfortable in their own home. The whole situation has created ongoing tension in our relationship. Sam feels rejected and unwelcome, while I feel like my boundaries and personal space aren't being respected. We both love each other, but we can't seem to find a middle ground on this issue that works for both of us. Sam has started spending less time at my place and more time at theirs, which makes me sad because I do want them here. But they say they can't feel comfortable in a space that doesn't allow any expression of their personality or style. they've started making comments about how sterile and unwelcoming my apartment feels. I've been wondering if I'm being too inflexible about this. Maybe I should let Sam add a few decorative touches and try to adjust to having a busier visual environment. But every time I imagine coming home to clutter and bright colours everywhere, I feel stressed and anxious about losing my peaceful space. The worst part is that this conflict is affecting other areas of our relationship. Sam has become more critical of my preferences in general, saying I'm too controlling and set in my ways. They've started questioning whether we're compatible long-term if I can't handle small compromises like home decoration. I love Sam and want our relationship to work, but I also need to feel comfortable and calm in my own home. I don't think wanting to maintain my preferred aesthetic in my own apartment makes me selfish or controlling. But Sam clearly sees it as a rejection of them and their contributions to our relationship. We're at a standstill where neither of us wants to give ground. Sam wants the right to personalise our shared space, and I want the right to keep my home environment the way it works best for me. I'm starting to wonder if this is a fundamental compatibility issue that we can't resolve. Am I wrong for refusing to let my partner redecorate my apartment? Should I be more flexible about blending our styles even if it makes me uncomfortable in my own space? Or do I have the right to maintain control over my home environment, even if it hurts my partner's feelings? That story comes to an end right there. Sam really thought they could completely redecorate someone else's apartment as a surprise and then get upset when their unauthorized makeover wasn't appreciated. There's a huge difference between compromising on shared spaces and letting someone bulldoze your personal sanctuary because they think their style is better. When you need your home to be a calm space for your mental health and work, that's not being controlling, that's knowing what you need to function. Some people think love means getting to override your partner's boundaries, but actually respecting someone's space is way more romantic than forcing them to live with decor that stresses them out. Our next story shows what happens when family emergencies collide with personal boundaries and the guilt that comes with saying no. Am I the bad person for skipping my best friend's birthday trip? My best friend Maya has been planning this huge birthday weekend for months. She wanted to rent a house in the mountains, go wine tasting, do all these expensive activities to celebrate turning 30. When she first mentioned it, I was excited and said I'd love to come. The problem started when Maya sent out the detailed itinerary and budget breakdown. The total cost per person was going to be almost $800 for the weekend, not including travel to get there. That covered our portion of the house rental, planned activities, group meals, and her birthday dinner at some fancy restaurant she'd researched. I work as a teacher, and $800 is a significant chunk of my monthly budget. I'd been trying to save money for a down payment on a car since mine is falling apart, and this trip would basically wipe out 3 months of careful saving. But I didn't want to disappoint Maya on her milestone birthday, so I said I'd figure it out. About 2 weeks before the trip, my landlord informed me that my rent was going up by $200 starting next month. I'd been living in the same apartment for 3 years and had never dealt with a rent increase this steep. Combined with some unexpected medical bills from a recent urgent care visit, my finances were suddenly much tighter than I'd anticipated. I realised I genuinely couldn't afford the birthday trip anymore. I called Maya to explain the situation and told her I was really sorry, but I'd have to back out. I offered to take her to dinner locally to celebrate instead, or to contribute a smaller amount toward group gifts or activities, even though I couldn't attend. Maya's reaction was way more intense than I expected. She started crying and said I was ruining everything for everyone. She explained that the house rental and several activities required minimum numbers of people, and me dropping out meant everyone else would have to pay more to cover the difference. She said the whole trip might have to be cancelled because of my decision. I felt terrible hearing how upset she was, but I also felt trapped. I couldn't magically create $800 that I didn't have, and I couldn't justify going into debt for a birthday party when I had real financial responsibilities to handle. I tried to explain this to Maya, but she kept saying that if I'd planned better or prioritized differently, I could have made it work. Maya said she'd been looking forward to this trip for months, and that having her best friend there was the most important part of the celebration. She accused me of not caring enough about our friendship to make sacrifices for her special day. She pointed out times when she'd spent money on things for me and said she couldn't believe I wouldn't do the same for her. The conversation got really heated when Maya suggested that I could put the trip on a credit card and pay it off later. She said that's what most people do when they want to participate in important events but don't have cash available. She acted like my reluctance to go into debt was just an excuse to get out of something I didn't really want to do. I tried to explain that I don't believe in using credit cards for entertainment expenses, especially when I'm already dealing with unexpected financial pressures. Maya said I was being overly cautious and that missing her 30th birthday over money was something I'd regret forever. She made me feel like I was being cheap and unsupportive. The worst part was that Maya started telling our mutual friends that I was backing out of her birthday trip at the last minute. She framed it as me being unreliable and not caring about her, without mentioning the financial reality of what she was asking people to spend. Several friends reached out to try to convince me to change my mind. Some of them offered to help cover part of my costs, which was sweet but made me feel even worse about the whole situation. I didn't want to accept charity so I could attend a party, but I also felt guilty that my financial situation was affecting other people's plans and potentially their wallets too. Maya's other friends started getting involved, with some saying they understood money was tight but that true friends find a way to be there for important moments. Others were more supportive and said that $800 was a lot to ask of people, especially with such short notice about the exact costs. The group ended up having to reorganize parts of the trip and find cheaper alternatives for some activities. Maya was bitter about having to scale back her original vision, and she blamed me for forcing everyone to compromise on her special celebration. She said I'd ruined what was supposed to be the perfect 30th birthday weekend. Maya and I haven't spoken much since then. She's been cold and distant, giving short responses to my texts and declining my invitations to hang out locally. When I've tried to address the tension between us, she says she's still hurt that I abandoned her when she needed me most. Some friends think Maya is being unreasonable and that $800 is too much to expect from people without warning them up front about the costs. They say she should have been more understanding about my financial situation and not taken my absence so personally. Others think I should have found a way to make it work, even if it meant borrowing money or using credit cards. They say that milestone birthdays are once-in-a-lifetime events, and that missing Maya's 30th has permanently damaged our friendship in a way that can't be undone. I keep going back and forth about whether I made the right choice. Part of me wonders if I should have just put the trip on a credit card and dealt with the debt later. Maybe preserving my friendship with Maya was worth more than my financial principles. But another part of me feels like Maya was being unrealistic about what she was asking people to spend, and that a true friend would have been more understanding about genuine financial constraints. I didn't back out to be difficult or because I didn't care about her birthday. I backed out because I literally couldn't afford to participate. The friendship feels permanently changed now. Maya clearly sees my absence from her birthday trip as a betrayal, while I feel like she prioritized having an expensive party over understanding my financial reality. We used to talk every day, but now we barely communicate except for surface-level pleasantries. I miss our friendship, but I also don't regret protecting my financial stability. I'm still driving my falling-apart car and living paycheck to paycheck, but at least I'm not also dealing with credit card debt from a party I couldn't afford in the first place. That story ends right there. Maya really expected her friend to go into debt for a birthday party and then made her the villain when reality intervened. $800? With basically no notice isn't a friendship test. It's financial pressure disguised as loyalty. Real friends understand when money is tight, instead of demanding you choose between your financial stability and their good time. The fact that Maya is still holding this grudge shows she valued having the perfect Instagram weekend more than understanding her friend's actual circumstances. Moving into our next story about family dynamics and the weight of expectations that come with being related to someone. Am I the bad person for ignoring my friend's calls? I've been friends with Jessica for about 5 years, and I'm starting to realise that our friendship might be completely one-sided. She only reaches out to me when she needs something, and I'm getting tired of being treated like a personal assistant instead of an actual friend. At first, I didn't notice the pattern because Jessica's requests seemed reasonable. She'd call asking for rides to the airport, help moving furniture, someone to watch her cat while she was out of town, or advice about work problems. I was happy to help because that's what friends do for each other. But over time, I started realizing that Jessica never called just to chat or see how I was doing. Every phone call began with small talk that quickly led to asking for favors. She'd spend maybe 5 minutes asking about my life before launching into whatever she needed help with. It felt like she was just being polite before getting to the real reason for her call. The pattern became obvious when I started paying attention to when Jessica contacted me. She'd go weeks without any communication, then suddenly call multiple times when she had problems to solve. If I was dealing with my own stress or challenges, she'd listen for a few minutes before redirecting the conversation back to her issues. Jessica never offered to help me with anything. When I moved apartments last year, she said she was too busy to help, but suggested I hire movers. When I was sick with the flu, she didn't offer to bring soup or groceries. When I was stressed about work deadlines, she'd give generic advice and then change the subject to her own problems. The breaking point came 2 months ago when Jessica called me crying about a breakup. I spent 3 hours on the phone with her, listening to her process her emotions and offering support. The next day, she called asking if I could help her pack up her ex-boyfriend's things and return them to him because she didn't want to see him alone. I said yes and spent my entire Saturday helping Jessica organise boxes, loading them into my car, and driving across town to make the exchange. It was emotionally draining for both of us, but I wanted to be there for my friend during a difficult time. 2 weeks later, I was going through my own relationship problems and called Jessica, hoping to talk through some issues with my boyfriend. She listened for about 10 minutes before saying she had to go because she was meeting friends for dinner. She said we should talk soon, but never followed up to check how things worked out. The next week, Jessica called asking if I could dog sit her new puppy while she went on a weekend trip with friends. She didn't ask about my relationship situation or seem to remember that I'd been dealing with my own problems. It was like our previous conversation had never happened. I started to feel resentful and used. Jessica clearly saw me as someone who was available to solve her problems and provide services, but she didn't seem interested in being an actual friend who cared about my life and well-being. Our relationship felt completely transactional. I decided to test my theory by not immediately responding to Jessica's calls and texts. I wanted to see if she would reach out just to check in or maintain our friendship without needing something specific from me. The results were telling. For 3 weeks, Jessica didn't contact me at all. No texts asking how I was doing, no calls just to catch up, no invitations to hang out socially. The only communication I received was when she needed someone to pick up a prescription for her when she was stuck at work. When I didn't respond to that request, Jessica started calling repeatedly and sending texts asking if everything was okay. But even her concern seemed focused on whether I was available to help, rather than genuine worry about my well-being. She kept asking if I was mad at her or if she'd done something wrong. I finally answered one of her calls and tried to explain how I was feeling about our friendship. I told Jessica that I felt like she only contacted me when she needed favours, and that I missed having a friend who was interested in my life too. I suggested we try spending time together without any agenda or requests for help. Jessica got defensive and said she didn't realise she'd been taking advantage of me. She claimed she called me because she trusted me and valued my help, and that she thought I enjoyed being someone people could rely on. She said she'd been going through a lot of changes and hadn't been a good friend to anyone lately. She promised to do better and suggested we make plans to hang out without any ulterior motives. I was hopeful that maybe our conversation would help reset our friendship dynamics and create more balance between us. But within a week, Jessica was back to her old patterns. She called asking if I could help her assemble furniture she'd ordered online because she didn't want to pay for assembly service. When I said I was busy, she seemed surprised and a little hurt that I wasn't immediately available. I've been ignoring most of Jessica's calls and texts for the past month. I respond occasionally to show I'm not completely cutting her off, but I'm not jumping to help with every request or problem she brings to me. I wanted to see if she would adjust her behaviour or put effort into maintaining our friendship in other ways. Instead, Jessica has been complaining to mutual friends that I've become distant and unreliable. She's told people that she's going through a hard time and doesn't understand why I'm not being supportive like I used to be. She's painted herself as the victim of my sudden personality change. Several friends have reached out asking if Jessica and I are okay, saying she seems hurt and confused about why our friendship has changed. They don't know about the pattern of one-sided communication and favour asking that led to my decision to create some distance. I feel guilty because Jessica does seem genuinely confused about why I'm less available. Maybe she really didn't realise how one-sided our friendship had become. But I also feel like I gave her multiple opportunities to engage with me as a real friend, rather than just someone who provides services. Some people think I should have been more direct about setting boundaries instead of just becoming less responsive. They say that gradually withdrawing from the friendship is passive-aggressive, and that Jessica deserves a clear explanation of what needs to change. Others think Jessica is getting exactly what she put into the friendship, and that some people only learn when they experience consequences for their behaviour. They say that years of taking advantage of someone's kindness shouldn't be rewarded with continued availability. I'm torn between feeling bad about hurting Jessica's feelings and feeling relieved about not being on call for her problems anymore. I do miss aspects of our friendship, but I don't miss feeling like a personal assistant who occasionally gets treated like a human being. The whole situation has made me more aware of the balance in my other friendships. I've started noticing who reaches out just to check in versus who only contacts me when they need something. It's been eye-opening to see how many relationships in my life follow similar patterns. That story wraps up there. Jessica spent 5 years treating her friend like a personal service provider and then acted shocked when the free labour dried up. The fact that she immediately ran to mutual friends to play victim instead of self-reflecting shows exactly why this friendship was so draining. Some people mistake genuine kindness for unlimited availability and then can't understand why their human ATM eventually stops dispensing favours. When someone only remembers you exist during their emergencies, that's not friendship. That's convenience with a contact name. Our next story takes us into territory that shows how grief and family obligations can create impossible situations where someone always ends up being the bad guy. Am I the bad person for refusing to visit my dad in the hospital? My father is currently in the hospital recovering from a heart attack, and my entire family is pressuring me to visit him. They say I'm being cruel and heartless for staying away during his time of need, but they don't understand the history between us. My dad was an alcoholic throughout my childhood, and his drinking made our home life a nightmare. He wasn't just a quiet drunk who passed out on the couch. He was mean, unpredictable, and sometimes violent when he'd been drinking, which was most evenings and weekends. I have vivid memories of him screaming at my mum over things that didn't matter, throwing dishes when dinner wasn't ready fast enough, and generally creating an atmosphere of fear and tension in our house. My siblings and I learned to read his moods and hide in our rooms when we heard him opening beer cans after work. The worst incident happened when I was 14. My dad came home drunk and angry about something that had happened at work. He started yelling at my mum about the house being messy, even though she'd spent all day cleaning. When I tried to defend her, he grabbed me by the shirt and shoved me against the wall, so hard that I got a concussion. My mum took me to the emergency room that night, and I still remember the look on the doctor's face when he asked how I'd gotten hurt. My mum lied and said I'd fallen down the stairs, but I could tell the medical staff didn't believe her. Nobody called social services, though, and we went home to the same situation. After that incident, I started counting down the days until I could move out and never see my father again. I worked extra jobs in high school to save money for college, and I chose a school in a different state specifically to get away from my family's dysfunction. I wanted a fresh start where nobody knew about my chaotic childhood. When I graduated from college, my dad showed up to the ceremony drunk and made a scene by loudly commenting during the speeches. It was embarrassing and confirmed for me that he hadn't changed at all, despite years of my mum begging him to get help for his drinking problem. I made the decision to cut contact with my father completely. I told my mum and siblings that I loved them and wanted relationships with them, but that I couldn't have my dad in my life anymore. The trauma from my childhood was affecting my ability to trust people and form healthy relationships. My family understood initially and didn't pressure me to reconcile with my dad, but over the years, especially during holidays and family gatherings, there's been increasing pressure for me to forgive him and rebuild our relationship. They say he's gotten older and calmer, and that holding grudges will only hurt me in the long run. My dad did eventually get sober about 5 years ago after a DUI incident that scared him enough to seek treatment. My mum has been trying to convince me that he's a different person now, and that he genuinely regrets how he treated our family when he was drinking. But I've heard promises about him changing before, and I've seen him go through periods of sobriety only to start drinking again when life got stressful. More importantly, he's never actually apologised to me directly for the physical and emotional abuse I experienced as a child. When my mum called to tell me about his heart attack, she immediately asked when I'd be coming to the hospital. I told her I wouldn't be visiting and that I hoped he recovered, but that his medical emergency didn't change my decision to maintain distance from him. My mum started crying and said this could be my last chance to make peace with my father. She said that if something happened to him while we were estranged, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. She accused me of being stubborn and unforgiving when he was vulnerable and scared. My siblings have been calling and texting constantly, saying I need to put aside my anger and be there for family during this crisis. They say that whatever happened in the past, he's still my father, and he needs support from his children right now. They think I'm being petty and vindictive. My brother said that my dad has been asking for me, and that it's breaking his heart to know that one of his children won't even visit him in the hospital. My sister said that everyone makes mistakes and that I should show compassion for someone who's facing their own mortality. But I don't feel safe or comfortable being around my father, even in a hospital setting. The trauma from my childhood doesn't just disappear because he's sick, and being in the same room with him triggers anxiety and memories that I've worked hard to process in therapy. I've been in counselling for years to deal with the effects of growing up with an alcoholic, abusive parent. My therapist has supported my decision to maintain boundaries with my father and has helped me understand that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation or putting myself in situations that feel unsafe. My family doesn't understand this distinction. They think that if I've truly forgiven my dad, I should be willing to have a relationship with him and be present during medical emergencies. They see my absence as proof that I'm still angry and bitter about the past. Some extended family members have gotten involved, calling to tell me that life is short and that I should prioritise family relationships over old hurts. They say that my dad has paid for his mistakes by getting sober and that I'm being unforgiving by continuing to punish him. The pressure has been overwhelming, and I've started to question whether I'm being too rigid about my boundaries. Maybe I should visit him once, just to show that I don't wish him harm, even if I don't want an ongoing relationship. Maybe seeing him vulnerable and sick would help me find closure, but every time I imagine walking into that hospital room, I feel anxious and angry. I don't want to pretend that our relationship is something it's not. And I don't want to give my family false hope that this medical crisis will lead to reconciliation. I also worry that visiting him now would undo years of therapy and boundary setting work. I've built a life where I feel safe and stable, and I'm afraid that opening this door again will let all the old dysfunction back in. My dad is expected to recover from the heart attack, so this isn't a deathbed situation where I'd be missing final moments together. But my family acts like my absence is cruel and unusual, as if there's no legitimate reason why someone wouldn't want to visit their father in the hospital. They don't seem to understand that some relationships are too damaged to repair, and that protecting my own mental health has to be my priority. They think family obligation should override personal boundaries, but I've learned that sometimes loving yourself means disappointing other people. The guilt is eating away at me though. Part of me wonders if I'm being stubborn and missing an opportunity for healing. But a bigger part of me knows that I'm protecting myself from someone who caused me significant harm and has never taken full responsibility for it. That story comes to an end there. The family really thinks a medical emergency should override years of abuse and trauma, like it's some kind of reset button. Just because someone gets sober doesn't erase the damage they caused when they were drinking, especially when they've never actually apologized or acknowledged the harm they did. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to sacrifice your mental health on the altar of family expectations. Visiting someone in the hospital isn't a moral obligation when that person spent your childhood terrorizing you. Here's our next story about the complicated ethics of helping people who refuse to help themselves. Am I the bad person for refusing to cover my sister's therapy bills? My sister Emma has been struggling with anxiety and depression for years, and I've been really encouraging about her getting professional help. When she finally decided to start therapy, I was thrilled that she was taking steps to improve her mental health. What I didn't expect was for her to assume I'd be paying for it. Emma is 26 and works part-time at a retail job that doesn't offer health insurance benefits. She's been living with our parents since she dropped out of college 3 years ago, which means her living expenses are minimal. She pays them a small amount for rent and groceries, but most of her income goes toward entertainment and shopping. I'm 30 and work in finance, so I make significantly more money than Emma does. I've been financially stable for several years and own my own home, which I think gives my family the impression that I have unlimited disposable income. That's not true, but I do have more financial security than my siblings. When Emma first mentioned wanting to try therapy, I was really supportive. I helped her research therapists in our area, explained how to check if any of them offered sliding scale fees for people with limited income, and even offered to help her navigate insurance options if she wanted to look into getting coverage. Emma found a therapist she liked and had been seeing her for about a month when she casually mentioned that the sessions were expensive, but worth it. I asked how she was managing the cost, and she said she figured I'd help her out since I'd been so supportive of her getting treatment. I was confused because we'd never discussed me paying for her therapy. I'd offered to help her find affordable options and figure out payment plans, but I'd never said I would cover the costs myself. When I pointed this out, Emma seemed surprised and said she thought it was obvious that I'd want to help her mental health. Emma explained that therapy sessions cost $150 each, and she was going weekly, so it was $600 a month. She'd already had 4 sessions and expected me to reimburse her for those and continue paying for future appointments. I told Emma that I supported her decision to get therapy, but that I couldn't afford to pay $600 a month for her treatment indefinitely. That's more than my car payment, and it would significantly impact my own budget and financial goals. Emma got upset and said I'd been telling her for years that she needed professional help, so now that she was finally getting it, I should be willing to support her financially. She accused me of caring more about money than about her mental health and well-being. I tried to explain that encouraging someone to get therapy and agreeing to pay for their therapy are 2 completely different things. I suggested she look into community mental health centres that offer services on a sliding scale, or consider online therapy options that might be more affordable. Emma said she'd already found a therapist she connected with and didn't want to start over with someone new just because of money. She said switching therapists would set back her progress, and that I was basically asking her to choose between getting help and being able to afford it. She also pointed out that she'd been living with depression and anxiety for years, which had affected her ability to finish college and find better paying work. She said her mental health issues were partly responsible for her financial situation, so asking her to pay for treatment on her own was like punishing her for being sick. This created a really difficult dynamic because I do think Emma needs professional help, and I don't want financial barriers to prevent her from getting treatment. But I also don't think I should be automatically responsible for funding her healthcare just because I make more money than she does. Our parents got involved when Emma told them about our disagreement. They said they couldn't afford to help with therapy costs since they're on a fixed income, but they thought I should consider helping my sister during a vulnerable time in her life. My mum pointed out that Emma had been struggling emotionally for years and that therapy might be the key to helping her become more independent and successful. She suggested that paying for Emma's treatment could be viewed as an investment in her future stability. My dad said that family should help family, especially when it comes to health issues. He compared paying for Emma's therapy to helping someone with medical bills after an accident, saying that mental health treatment shouldn't be treated differently than physical health treatment. But I felt like there was a difference between helping someone in a temporary crisis and taking on an ongoing financial obligation that could last for years. Therapy is often a long-term process, and I couldn't commit to paying hundreds of dollars a month indefinitely. I also worried that if I started paying for Emma's therapy, she might become dependent on my financial support and lose motivation to improve her own financial situation. She'd been living with our parents for years without making significant changes to her work situation or pursuing additional education or training. After thinking about it for a week, I offered Emma a compromise. I said I'd help her pay for 3 more months of therapy while she researched more affordable options or looked into getting health insurance through a full-time job. I thought this would give her time to find a sustainable solution without leaving her completely, without support immediately. Emma rejected my compromise and said 3 months wasn't enough time to make real progress in therapy. She accused me of putting a timeline on her mental health and said I was being controlling by trying to dictate the terms of her treatment. She said if I really cared about her well-being, I'd help without conditions or limits. The situation escalated when Emma started telling extended family members that I was refusing to help her get mental health treatment. She framed it as me being selfish and unsupportive when she was finally trying to address her problems. Several relatives reached out to suggest I reconsider helping her. Emma also started making passive-aggressive comments about how some people prioritize money over family and how she guessed she'd just have to stay depressed since she couldn't afford help. She'd make these comments in front of our parents, clearly trying to make me feel guilty about my decision. I stood firm on my compromise offer, but Emma continued going to therapy and racking up bills she couldn't pay. After 2 months, she owed her therapist over $1,200 and was stressed about the debt on top of everything else she was dealing with. My mum called me crying, saying Emma was in worse shape than before because now she had financial stress on top of her mental health issues. She begged me to just pay the outstanding balance so Emma could continue treatment without the added pressure of debt. I felt terrible seeing Emma struggle, but I also felt manipulated by the situation. It seemed like she deliberately created a crisis by continuing therapy she couldn't afford, assuming that I'd eventually cave and pay the bills to avoid watching her suffer. Emma's therapist had to stop seeing her because of the unpaid balance, which meant she lost the therapeutic relationship she'd been building. She blamed me for disrupting her treatment and said I'd set back her progress by months or maybe years. The whole family was upset with me, saying I'd let Emma down when she was trying to get help. They acted like I'd personally prevented her from receiving mental health treatment instead of just refusing to take on financial responsibility that was never mine to begin with. Emma eventually found a community mental health centre that offered sliding scale therapy for people with low incomes. She's been going there for a few months now and says the therapist is helpful, though not as good as her original one. She still brings up the fact that I wouldn't pay for her preferred therapist whenever we have family gatherings. She makes comments about how she could have gotten better help if certain people had been more supportive, clearly referring to me. I don't regret my decision because I think Emma needed to take responsibility for finding affordable mental health care instead of assuming someone else would pay for it. But I do feel bad that the whole situation created so much family drama and delayed her getting help. Some friends think I was right to set boundaries about what I was willing to pay for, especially since Emma hadn't asked beforehand and just expected me to cover the costs. Others think I should have helped more given how much Emma was struggling and how much more money I make than she does. The hardest part is wondering if my refusal to pay actually made Emma's mental health worse in the short term. She was stressed about money, lost her therapeutic relationship, and felt unsupported by family, all because I wouldn't write checks for her treatment. But I also think that always rescuing Emma financially doesn't teach her to solve her own problems or build independence. She's been relying on our parents for housing and now expected me to cover her healthcare costs without taking steps to improve her own financial situation. That story ends right there. Emma really thought she could just start expensive therapy and send the bill to her sister like it was some kind of family health insurance plan. The manipulation of continuing treatment she couldn't afford to create a crisis that would force payment is particularly gross. Encouraging someone to get help doesn't mean you're automatically signing up to fund their entire mental health journey, especially when they're perfectly capable of finding affordable options but just prefer the expensive ones. Let's move into our next story about personal boundaries and what happens when people think your possessions should be available for family use. Am I the bad person for refusing to let my brother's kids use my gaming console? My brother Mark has 2 sons, ages 8 and 12, who are obsessed with video games. Every time they come to visit, they immediately ask if they can play on my PlayStation, and I've started saying no because they don't take care of other people's things. I spent months saving up to buy my gaming setup, which includes a PS5, several expensive controllers, and a collection of games that cost me hundreds of dollars. I work hard for my money, and I take really good care of my electronics because I know how much they cost to replace. The problem started the first time Mark brought his kids over to my apartment. They saw my gaming setup and were immediately fascinated because they only have an older Xbox at their dad's house. I said they could play for a little while, thinking it would be nice to share something they'd enjoy. Within an hour, they'd somehow gotten food grease on one of my controllers, left sticky fingerprints all over my TV screen, and were arguing so loudly over whose turn it was that my neighbours could probably hear them. When I asked them to clean up after themselves, they seemed confused, like it hadn't occurred to them to be careful with someone else's things. The next time they visited, I decided to be more proactive about setting rules. I explained that they needed to have clean hands before touching my controllers, that they should take turns without arguing, and that they needed to put everything back where they found it when they were done playing. They agreed to my rules, but didn't follow them. The 8-year-old spilled juice on my carpet right next to my entertainment centre, and the 12-year-old somehow managed to jam one of my game discs so badly that it wouldn't come out of the console. I had to spend 20 minutes carefully extracting it, and there were scratches on the disc's surface. After that incident, I told Mark that his kids were welcome at my place, but that my gaming system was off limits. Unless he was willing to supervise them the entire time they were playing. Mark said I was being unreasonable and that kids will be kids, accidents happen, and I shouldn't be so uptight about material possessions. Mark pointed out that his boys don't get to play on newer gaming systems very often, and that letting them use mine would make their visits to my place more enjoyable. He said I was being selfish for hoarding my games when sharing them would make the kids happy. I tried to explain that it wasn't about being selfish. It was about protecting expensive equipment that I'd worked hard to afford. I pointed out that his kids had already caused damage twice, in just 2 visits, and that I couldn't afford to keep replacing controllers and games every time they came over. Mark got defensive and said his kids weren't trying to cause problems. They were just excited about playing games and maybe got a little careless. He accused me of caring more about my stuff than about spending quality time with my nephews. The situation got worse when the kids started asking me directly why they couldn't play games at my house anymore. They seemed hurt and confused, and I felt terrible seeing their disappointed faces when I had to say no. But I also knew that if I gave in, the same problems would happen again. Mark started making comments about how some people forget what it's like to be a kid and lose perspective about what really matters in life. He said I was turning into one of those people who values possessions more than relationships with family. I offered alternative activities when the boys visited, like going to the park, playing board games, or watching movies together. But they were clearly disappointed that my gaming system was off limits, and their lack of enthusiasm for other activities made the visits feel awkward and forced. The final straw came when I found out that Mark had been telling his kids that I didn't want them to have fun at my house because I was worried about my games getting dirty. He'd made me sound like a mean uncle who cared more about keeping things clean than about his nephews enjoying themselves. I confronted Mark about misrepresenting my position to his children. I explained that I wasn't trying to prevent them from having fun, but that I needed them to be more careful with expensive equipment. I said that teaching kids to respect other people's belongings was actually an important life lesson. Mark said I was overthinking the whole situation and that a few scratches or spills weren't worth damaging my relationship with his sons. He said his kids were starting to think I didn't like them because I wouldn't let them play games when they visited. Our parents got involved when Mark complained to them about my unreasonable rules around my gaming system. They said they understood that I wanted to protect my things, but that I should find ways to include my nephews in activities they enjoyed. My mum suggested that maybe I could set up specific times when the boys could play games while I supervised closely. She said that completely banning them from using my console seemed harsh and might make them feel unwelcome in my home. My dad said that when he was growing up, families shared everything, and that my focus on protecting my possessions showed I had different values than he'd tried to teach me. He said that things could be replaced, but that relationships with family members couldn't. But I felt like they were missing the point. This wasn't about being unwilling to share or not caring about my nephews. This was about the fact that Mark's kids had repeatedly shown they couldn't be trusted to handle expensive electronics carefully, and that their father wasn't willing to teach them or supervise them properly. I also resented the implication that I was somehow wrong for wanting to protect things I'd worked hard to afford. If someone borrowed my car and brought it back with dents and scratches, nobody would expect me to just keep lending it to them. Why should my gaming equipment be different? The visits with Mark and his kids have become increasingly tense. The boys clearly want to play games but can't. Mark is frustrated with my boundaries, and I feel guilty for disappointing my nephews, while also feeling justified in protecting my belongings. Some friends think I'm being reasonable for setting limits after the kids proved they couldn't be careful. Others think I should just accept that some damage is inevitable when kids are involved and that family relationships are more important than keeping things in perfect condition. I've considered buying some cheaper controllers that I wouldn't mind if they got damaged, but I'm worried that would send the message that it's okay to be careless with other people's things as long as they're not too expensive. The whole situation has made family gatherings awkward because Mark's kids always ask about the games. Mark makes passive-aggressive comments about my rules, and everyone else tries to change the subject to avoid conflict. That story comes to an end there. Mark really thought his kids should get unlimited access to expensive electronics, despite proving multiple times they can't handle them responsibly. Teaching children to respect other people's belongings isn't being mean. It's basic parenting. But apparently, that's too much effort when you can just guilt trip the owner instead. The idea that you should let family members repeatedly damage your stuff because relationships matter more than possessions completely misses the point about teaching respect and consequences. Moving into our final story about the complex dynamics of friendship and what happens when someone expects you to be available for their crisis without considering your own limitations. Am I the bad person for not taking my friend to the airport? My friend Sarah asked me to drive her to the airport for a 6 a.m. flight, which would mean picking her up at 4 in the morning. I said no, and now she's acting like I completely abandoned her when she needed help. Sarah had booked this flight for a work conference about 2 months in advance. She's always been the type of person who tries to save money wherever possible, so instead of booking a reasonable departure time or arranging airport transportation, she chose the cheapest possible flight that left at an ungodly hour. When Sarah first mentioned her travel plans, I made a joke about how early she'd have to get up for a 6 a.m. flight. She laughed and said she was dreading it, but that saving $200 on airfare was worth one rough morning. At that point, transportation arrangements weren't even part of our conversation. About 2 weeks before her trip, Sarah casually asked if I'd be able to give her a ride to the airport. She said she'd looked into other options like ride shares and airport shuttles, but that having a friend drop her off would be much easier and cheaper than paying for transportation. I immediately felt uncomfortable about the request because 4 a.m. is an absolutely brutal time to be driving across town to the airport. I'm not a morning person under the best circumstances, and the thought of setting an alarm for 3:30 in the morning made me feel exhausted just thinking about it. I told Sarah I'd think about it and get back to her, hoping maybe she'd make other arrangements or I'd feel differently about it after considering it more. But the more I thought about waking up at 3:30 a.m. to do someone a favour, the more I dreaded it. The drive to the airport from my house takes about 45 minutes in normal traffic, but at 4 a.m. it would probably be 30 minutes each way. That meant I'd be giving up at least 2 hours of sleep, including the time it would take me to fall back asleep after getting home. I'm someone who really struggles with sleep disruption, and I knew that getting up at 3:30 would mess up my sleep schedule for several days afterward. I had important work meetings that week and couldn't afford to be exhausted and unfocused. After thinking about it for a few days, I called Sarah and explained that I couldn't afford the early morning disruption to my sleep schedule because I had important work commitments that week. Sarah didn't take my explanation well. She said she was disappointed that I wouldn't help her out when she really needed it, and that she'd thought she could count on me as a friend. She made me feel guilty by pointing out that it was just one morning, and that she'd do the same for me if I asked. I tried to suggest alternatives like booking a rideshare in advance or taking the airport shuttle, but Sarah said those options were expensive, and that she'd specifically asked me because she trusted me to be there for her. She made it sound like I was abandoning her in her time of need. Sarah ended up having to pay $50 for a rideshare to the airport, and she's been cold to me ever since she got back from her trip. She makes passive-aggressive comments about how some people can't be bothered to help their friends, and she's been declining invitations to hang out. When I tried to address the tension between us, Sarah said she was hurt that I'd prioritise my sleep over helping her with something important. She said she'd learned who she could really count on when things got difficult. I feel bad that Sarah had to spend money she didn't want to spend, but I also don't think I was wrong to decline a favour that would have significantly disrupted my sleep and work performance. Setting an alarm for 3:30 in the morning to drive across town feels like a pretty big ask, especially for a flight she chose specifically because it was cheap. Some friends think Sarah was being unreasonable to expect someone to wake up at that hour just to save her money on transportation. Others think I should have sucked it up for one morning to help a friend in need. The whole situation has made me question whether I'm a good friend or just someone who's not willing to make sacrifices for the people I care about. That story ends there. Sarah really expected someone to sacrifice their sleep and well-being so she could save $50 on a rideshare. When you choose the cheapest flight that leaves at dawn, arranging your own transportation should be part of that budget calculation. The guilt trip about learning who she can count on is rich coming from someone who won't pay for basic airport transport, but expects friends to wake up at 3 a.m. instead. Our next story takes us into the complicated world of family expectations and personal boundaries. Am I the bad person for refusing to apologize to my cousin? My cousin Jake graduated from college last month and had a big party to celebrate. I was supposed to go, but I ended up not making it, and now my whole family is demanding I apologize to him. I work in healthcare, and my schedule is absolutely brutal. I regularly pull 12-hour shifts and sometimes work 6 days a week when we're short-staffed. The week of Jake's party, I'd worked 5 straight days of overtime because 2 of our nurses had called in sick with the flu. Jake's graduation party was on a Saturday evening, and I'd originally planned to attend. I'd even bought him a gift and was looking forward to celebrating his achievement. But by Saturday afternoon, I was completely exhausted from the week I'd had. I'd gotten home Friday night around 10 p.m. after a particularly difficult shift where we'd lost a patient and had several emergency admissions. I was emotionally drained on top of being physically tired. I set my alarm to give myself enough time to shower and drive to the party, but when it went off Saturday afternoon, I could barely keep my eyes open. I made the decision to skip the party and stay home to rest. I knew I needed to recharge before going back to work on Monday, and I honestly didn't think I'd be good company in the state I was in. I texted Jake to congratulate him and apologize for not being able to make it, saying I was dealing with work exhaustion. Jake responded that he was disappointed but understood that work could be demanding. I thought that was the end of it and spent the rest of the weekend sleeping and trying to recover from the brutal week I'd had. But apparently, Jake's parents, my aunt and uncle, were not as understanding. They started telling other family members that I'd blown off Jake's graduation party and that it was disrespectful to skip such an important milestone celebration. They made it sound like I'd chosen not to come for frivolous reasons. My mum called me the next week, saying that Jake's parents were hurt that I hadn't shown up, and that they thought I should have made more effort to be there for such a significant achievement. She said they were expecting an apology for missing the party. I was confused because I'd already apologized to Jake directly, and he'd seemed fine with my explanation. I told my mum that I'd been working overtime all week and was too exhausted to be social, which I thought was a reasonable excuse for missing a party. But my mum said that graduation only happens once, and that I should have pushed through my tiredness to support my cousin. She said the family was disappointed in me for not prioritizing Jake's celebration, especially since he's always been a good kid who deserved support from his relatives. My aunt called me directly and said she'd been hurt that I hadn't come to the party after saying I would be there. She said they'd been counting on family members to show up and celebrate Jake's achievement, and that my absence had been noticed by everyone who attended. She also said that being tired from work wasn't really an excuse for missing important family events, and that everyone has demanding jobs but still makes time for family obligations. She wanted me to call Jake and give him a proper apology for letting him down. I tried to explain that I work in a field where exhaustion isn't just about being sleepy, it's about being mentally and emotionally drained from dealing with life and death situations. I said that attending a party when I was in that state wouldn't have been fair to anyone, including Jake. But my aunt said that I was making excuses and that if I'd really wanted to be there, I would have found a way to make it work. She said other family members had driven long distances and rearranged their schedules to attend, so my 1-hour drive after a long work week shouldn't have been impossible. The pressure from family members has been intense. Several relatives have reached out to say that Jake was disappointed more people didn't come to his party, and that my absence was particularly noticed since I had originally committed to being there. Jake himself hasn't said anything more about it, but I can tell the family drama is affecting him. He's been quieter than usual at family gatherings, and I worry that he actually is hurt by my absence, even though he initially seemed understanding. Some family members think I'm overthinking the whole situation and that a simple apology would smooth everything over. They say that whether I had good reasons or not, disappointing someone on their graduation day warrants saying sorry. Others think my aunt and uncle are being unreasonable for demanding an apology when I had legitimate work exhaustion and already explained the situation to Jake. They say that adults should be able to understand when someone's job demands interfere with social obligations. I keep going back and forth about whether I should just apologise to keep peace in the family. It would be easy enough to call Jake and say, I'm sorry for missing his party, even if I don't think I did anything wrong. But I also feel like apologising would be admitting that work exhaustion isn't a valid reason to skip social events, which sets a precedent I'm not comfortable with. My job is demanding, and sometimes I need to prioritise my own well-being over family gatherings. The whole situation has made me feel guilty about a decision I thought was reasonable at the time. Maybe I should have pushed through the exhaustion and attended the party even though I felt terrible. Maybe supporting family should always come before personal comfort. That story ends right there. The family really thinks someone should apologise for being too exhausted to party after working healthcare overtime during a flu outbreak. Jake himself was understanding, but his parents decided to turn it into family drama and demand formal apologies. Sometimes taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, especially when you're literally saving lives all week. The guilt trip about graduation only happening once ignores the fact that burnout is real, and showing up half dead wouldn't have been much of a celebration anyway. Let's move into our next story about the complicated ethics of family financial expectations. Am I the bad person for selling my old phone instead of giving it to my brother? I upgraded to a new iPhone last month and plan to sell my old one to help offset the cost. My brother Danny found out and got upset that I didn't offer it to him first, saying I should prioritise family over making money. My old phone was an iPhone 12 in really good condition. I'd taken excellent care of it with a protective case and screen protector from day one, so it looked almost new despite being 2 years old. I knew I could get around $400 for it if I sold it online. Danny has been complaining about his phone for months. He's got some ancient Android that barely works, the battery dies constantly, and he's always talking about how he needs an upgrade. But every time the topic comes up, he mentions not being able to afford a new phone because money's tight. When I posted my old iPhone for sale online, Danny saw it and immediately called me asking why I didn't offer it to him first. He said he'd been hoping I'd give it to him when I upgraded, and that he was hurt I was selling it to strangers instead of helping out family. I explained that I was selling the phone to help pay for my new one, and that $400 was a significant amount of money for me too. I'm not wealthy, and the phone sale would cover almost half the cost of my upgrade. Danny got upset and said that family should help family, especially when someone really needs something and someone else is just trying to make extra money. He pointed out that $400 wouldn't make or break me, but having a working phone would significantly improve his daily life. He offered to pay me $50 for the phone, saying that was all he could afford right now, but that he'd pay more later when his financial situation improved. I told him that wasn't a fair deal, since the phone was worth 8 times that amount. Danny accused me of being greedy and caring more about money than about helping my brother. He said I was essentially choosing profit over family relationships, and that I'd rather sell to strangers than help someone who shared my blood. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to be mean or greedy, but that I had my own financial goals, and the phone sale was part of my budget planning. I said if I gave away something worth $400, it would affect my ability to manage my own expenses. Danny said that's what family's for, helping each other out when someone needs something the other person has. He pointed out that I had a working phone and didn't need two. While he was struggling with a device that barely functioned, the conversation got heated when Danny said I was being selfish and that he was disappointed in the kind of person I'd become. He accused me of forgetting where I came from and acting like I was too good to help out my own brother. I felt bad hearing how upset he was, but I also felt like he was being unreasonable Just because I had something he wanted didn't mean I was obligated to give it to him for practically nothing. I'd worked hard to afford my phone upgrade and was counting on the sale to make it financially manageable. Danny ended up buying a refurbished phone from somewhere else, but he's been cold to me ever since. He makes comments about how some people put money before family, and he's declined several invitations to family gatherings where I'll be present. Our parents found out about the disagreement and said they thought I should have offered Danny a better deal on the phone. They pointed out that he's struggling financially while I have a stable job, and that helping family members, when you can afford to, is the right thing to do. My mum suggested I could have sold the phone to Danny for $200, which would have been a compromise between his $50 offer and the full market value. She said family discounts are normal and expected when someone needs help, but I felt like even $200 would have been a significant loss for me, and that Danny's financial problems weren't automatically my responsibility to solve. I'd saved up for my phone upgrade and was counting on the full sale price to make it work within my budget. Some friends think Danny was being entitled to expect a $400 phone for $50 just because we're related. They say that family relationships don't mean you have to give away valuable possessions at huge losses. Others think I could have been more generous and found a middle ground that helped Danny without completely sacrificing my own financial interests. They say that maintaining family relationships is sometimes worth taking a financial hit. The ongoing tension with Danny has affected other family relationships too. Some relatives think I was being stingy, while others support my decision to get fair value for my property. Family gatherings have become awkward because Danny and I barely speak to each other. I keep wondering if I should have just given him the phone to preserve our relationship. $400 is a lot of money to me, but losing my brother's respect and affection might be worth more than that in the long run. That story wraps up there. Danny really thought $50 was a reasonable offer for a $400 phone just because they shared DNA. The entitlement to expect massive family discounts without considering the seller's own financial needs is wild. When someone upgrades their phone specifically to sell the old one and fund the new purchase, asking for a 90% discount isn't helping family. It's expecting them to subsidize your technology needs. Blood relation doesn't automatically equal charity pricing. Moving forward to our next story about caregiving expectations and the weight of family obligations. Am I the bad person for not taking care of my mum's dog? My mother is moving to a senior living facility that doesn't allow pets, and she wants me to take in her 10-year-old golden retriever, Buddy. I told her I can't, and now she's saying I'm abandoning both her and the dog she loves. Buddy is a sweet dog who's been part of my mum's life for a decade. She got him after my dad passed away, and he's been her constant companion through some really difficult years. I understand how much he means to her and how heartbreaking it must be to think about giving him up. The problem is that I'm genuinely not in a position to take care of a large dog. I live in a small apartment with no yard, I work long hours, and I travel frequently for my job. My lifestyle just isn't compatible with pet ownership, especially for a dog that size who needs exercise and attention. I also have no experience with dogs. I've never owned a pet as an adult, and I honestly don't know the first thing about caring for one. Buddy is getting older and will likely need more veterinary care and special attention as he ages, which feels overwhelming to someone who's never dealt with pet health issues. When my mum first brought up the idea of me taking Buddy, I tried to explain my concerns about my living situation and lifestyle. I suggested we look into other options, like finding him a good home with a family that has experience with dogs and a better setup for pet care. My mum got emotional and said she couldn't bear the thought of Buddy living with strangers. She said he's used to being part of a family and that giving him to people who don't know him would be traumatic for him in his senior years. She also pointed out that Buddy knows me and is comfortable with me since I visit regularly. She said it would be easier for him to adjust to living with someone familiar rather than starting over with a completely new family. I tried to explain that knowing me as a visitor is different from living with me full-time, and that my small apartment and busy schedule wouldn't give Buddy the quality of life he deserves. I said I was worried I wouldn't be able to take proper care of him. My mum said that if I really cared about her and understood how much Buddy means to her, I'd find a way to make it work. She accused me of making excuses because I didn't want to be inconvenienced by taking care of her beloved pet. She started crying and said she felt like she was losing everything that mattered to her. First, she had to give up her house and her independence, and now she was being forced to abandon the dog who'd been her closest companion for years. The guilt was overwhelming because I could see how much pain she was in about the whole situation. But I also knew that taking Buddy would be setting both of us up for failure. I don't have the time, space, or experience to give him the care he needs. I offered to help find Buddy a good home with people who have experience with older dogs and the right living situation for a golden retriever. I said we could screen potential families carefully to make sure he'd be well cared for and loved. My mum rejected this idea and said I was being heartless and selfish. She said that family takes care of family, and that included the pets that are part of the family. She accused me of abandoning her when she needed my help most. Other family members got involved when my mum told them about my refusal to take Buddy. My aunt called to say she was disappointed in me for not stepping up when my mother was going through such a difficult transition. My cousin said that taking care of a family dog is just part of being a responsible adult child, and that I should be willing to adjust my lifestyle to help my mum during this challenging time. She said pets are family members, not disposable possessions, but I felt like they were asking me to take on a responsibility I wasn't equipped for, which wouldn't be fair to Buddy either. A dog deserves an owner who can provide proper care, exercise, and attention, not someone who's stressed about meeting his basic needs. I researched senior dog rescue organisations and found several that specialise in finding homes for older pets whose owners can no longer care for them. These organisations do thorough screening and follow-up to ensure the dogs are placed in appropriate homes. When I presented this information to my mum, she got angry and said I was trying to get rid of Buddy, like he was garbage. She said she'd rather have him put to sleep than give him to strangers who might not love him properly. That threat made me feel even worse because I knew she was serious. My mum has always been dramatic when she doesn't get her way, but the thought of Buddy being euthanized because I couldn't take him was heartbreaking. I've been going back and forth about whether I should just agree to take Buddy to prevent something terrible from happening to him, but I'm also worried that agreeing would be a mistake that would hurt both of us in the long run. The situation has created a huge rift between my mum and me during what's already a difficult time for her. She's barely speaking to me and has told other family members that she's disappointed in who I've become as a person. That story comes to an end there. Mum really tried to emotionally blackmail her daughter into pet ownership by threatening to euthanize a healthy dog if she couldn't get her way. Taking care of a senior dog requires time, space, money, and experience that OP simply doesn't have. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a pet is find them a home where they'll actually be cared for properly instead of warehoused in an unsuitable situation. The manipulation tactics here are particularly cruel because they put both the daughter. Our next story takes us into the complicated territory and the dog in an impossible position of friendship boundaries and financial expectations. Am I the bad person for not loaning money to a friend in debt? My friend Marcus has been asking me to lend him money for months, and I keep saying no because he's terrible with finances. Now he's calling me a fake friend and saying I don't care about his struggles. Marcus and I have been friends since college, and I've watched him make poor financial decisions for years. He's the type of person who buys expensive things impulsively, eats out constantly instead of cooking at home, and never seems to have money saved for emergencies or unexpected expenses. Over the past 2 years, Marcus has gotten himself into serious debt. He owes money on several credit cards, he's behind on his car payments, and he recently had to borrow money from his parents to make root causes of his financial problems. He keeps rent. instead of addressing the looking for quick fixes and bailouts. The first time Marcus asked me for money was about 6 months ago. He needed $300 to avoid having his car repossessed, and he promised he'd pay me back within a month. I felt bad for him and agreed to lend him the money. Thinking it was a one-time emergency, Marcus never paid me back. Every time I brought it up, he'd say he was still struggling and would get me the money as soon as things improved. Meanwhile, he kept posting on social media about expensive meals, new clothes, and entertainment expenses that suggested he wasn't actually prioritizing paying back his debt. A few months later, Marcus asked for another loan, this time for $500 to cover credit card minimum payments. I reminded him that he still owed me from the previous loan, and he said he'd pay back both amounts together once he got caught up on his bills. I said no to the second loan request, because it was clear Marcus wasn't learning from his financial mistakes or making changes to avoid future problems. I told him I was willing to help him create a budget or find financial counselling resources, but that I couldn't keep lending money that wouldn't be repaid. Marcus got upset and said I was being unsupportive when he was going through a really difficult time. He pointed out that I have a stable job and savings, while he's struggling to keep his head above water financially. He made me feel guilty for having better financial management skills. Since then, Marcus has asked me for money several more times for various emergencies. He needed money for car repairs, medical bills, and even groceries during particularly tight months. Each time, I've said no and reminded him about the money he already owes me. Marcus has started getting angry about my refusal to help him. He says that real friends support each other during hard times, and that my unwillingness to lend money shows I don't actually care about his well-being. He's accused me of being selfish and greedy. Last week, Marcus asked me for $1,000 to help him get caught up on all his bills and start fresh. He said it would be a one-time thing that would solve all his problems and allow him to pay me back everything he owes plus the new amount. I told him absolutely not, and explained that lending him more money wouldn't solve his underlying financial problems. I said he needed to address his spending habits and learn to live within his means instead of constantly looking for bailouts. Marcus exploded and said I was a terrible friend who only cared about money. He accused me of being judgmental about his financial struggles and said I didn't understand what it was like to live paycheck to paycheck. He said he was disappointed in who I'd turned out to be as a person. He's been telling mutual friends that I refused to help him when he desperately needed it, painting me as someone who's selfish and unsympathetic. Several people have reached out to suggest I reconsider helping Marcus since he's clearly struggling. But I don't think lending Marcus more money would actually help him. He's proven that he won't pay back loans, and giving him money just enables his poor financial habits. He needs to learn to manage money responsibly, not find people to bail him out every time he overspends. Some friends think I'm being reasonable for not wanting to throw good money after bad, especially since Marcus still owes me from the first loan. They say that true friendship sometimes means refusing to enable destructive behaviour. Others think I should help Marcus since he's clearly in crisis and I have the means to assist him. They say that friendship requires sacrifice and that I should be willing to risk some money to help someone I care about get back on their feet. The whole situation has damaged our friendship significantly. Marcus barely speaks to me anymore, except to make passive-aggressive comments about people who abandon their friends. I miss our friendship, but I also don't regret protecting my money from someone who's proven unreliable. That story ends right there. Marcus really thought he could borrow money, never pay it back, then demand even larger loans, while calling his friends selfish for having boundaries. Enabling someone's financial irresponsibility isn't friendship. It's just subsidizing their bad decisions. When someone posts about expensive dinners on social media while claiming they can't pay back loans, they've pretty much announced where their priorities actually lie. Real friends don't treat you like a personal bank that never expects repayment. Let's move into our final story for tonight about personal space and family obligations. Am I the bad person for not answering calls on my day off. I work a demanding job and rarely get true time off, so when I finally had a Saturday, with no obligations, I turned my phone off to rest. Now my boss and co-workers are saying I'm unreliable and uncommitted to the team. I work as a project manager at a consulting firm, which means I'm constantly putting out fires and dealing with client emergencies. My typical workday is 10 to 12 hours, and I often take calls and answer emails from home in the evenings and on weekends. I haven't had a real day off in about 6 weeks because there's always been some crisis that needed my attention. Even on days when I'm not officially working, I end up spending hours on the phone or computer dealing with urgent issues that can't wait until Monday. Last Saturday was the first time in over a month that I didn't have any scheduled meetings, client calls, or pressing deadlines. I was looking forward to sleeping in, doing some personal errands, and just having a day where I wasn't thinking about work constantly. I decided to turn my phone off Friday night and leave it off until Sunday evening. I wanted to have one full day where I wasn't tempted to check emails or answer work calls. I felt like I desperately needed the mental break to recharge and avoid burning out completely. Saturday morning, I slept until 10 a.m. for the first time in months. I made a nice breakfast, went for a walk, did some cleaning around my apartment, and just enjoyed having unstructured time. It felt amazing to not be constantly checking my phone or worrying about work emergencies. When I turned my phone back on Sunday evening, I had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages from my boss and various co-workers. Apparently, there had been a client emergency on Saturday that they needed my help to resolve. My boss had called multiple times trying to reach me about a project that was having technical difficulties. When she couldn't get hold of me, she had to handle the situation herself and bring in other team members who weren't as familiar with the client's requirements. The client was apparently frustrated by the delay in getting their issue resolved, and my boss had to spend most of her Saturday dealing with damage control and apologising for the confusion. By the time I saw the messages, the crisis had been resolved, but not without significant stress and overtime for other people. When I got to work Monday morning, my boss called me into her office immediately. She said she was disappointed that I'd been completely unreachable during a client emergency and that my absence had created unnecessary problems for the team. I explained that I'd turned my phone off because I desperately needed a day to rest and recharge, and that I hadn't been scheduled to work Saturday. I pointed out that I regularly work overtime and weekends, and that I thought I was entitled to occasionally have uninterrupted personal time. My boss said that while she understood the need for work-life balance, being completely unreachable was unprofessional in my role. She said that as a project manager, clients expect me to be available for true emergencies, and that turning my phone off completely was irresponsible. She also pointed out that other team members had to sacrifice their weekends to cover for my unavailability, which wasn't fair to them. She said that if I needed time off, I should request it officially so the team could plan accordingly. Several co-workers made comments throughout the week about how they'd had to work extra hours because I was unreachable. Some were understanding about my need for downtime, but others seemed resentful that they'd been pulled into weekend work because of my decision. My colleague Sarah said she'd gotten calls all Saturday afternoon trying to track down information about the client's technical setup, which I would have been able to provide immediately. She said her own weekend plans had been disrupted because she had to research issues I was already familiar with. Another co-worker mentioned that this was the second time in recent months that I'd been difficult to reach during weekend emergencies. I pointed out that I had responded to calls both of those previous times, just not immediately, but he said clients expect faster response times. I started feeling guilty about the impact my phone break had on my colleagues. I hadn't intended to create extra work for anyone else, and I felt bad that people had to sacrifice their own personal time because I wasn't available. But I also felt frustrated that taking one day completely off was being treated like a major professional failure. I work constantly. I'm always available for emergencies, and I rarely take real time off. One Saturday without my phone shouldn't be grounds for questioning my commitment. My boss suggested I get a separate personal phone, so I can turn off my work phone while still being reachable for true emergencies. But that feels like a solution that still keeps me tethered to work, even during personal time. Some friends in other industries think my workplace has unrealistic expectations about availability, and that everyone deserves the right to disconnect occasionally without facing professional consequences. Others who work in similar roles say that being reachable for client emergencies is just part of the job at a certain level, and that I should have found a way to take a break while still being available for truly urgent situations. The whole situation has made me question whether I can continue in this role long term if I'm never allowed to fully disconnect from work. But I also don't want to be seen as someone who doesn't pull their weight when the team needs me. That story comes to an end there. The expectation that someone should be available 24/7, even on their days off, is exactly how workplace burnout happens. OP works 10 to 12-hour days regularly and hadn't had a real break in 6 weeks, but one Saturday offline makes them unreliable. The guilt about colleagues working extra hours is understandable, but the real problem is a workplace that can't function when one person takes a single day to rest. Sometimes protecting your mental health means disappointing people who've gotten too comfortable with your constant availability. And that brings us to the end of tonight's collection of stories. I hope these gave you something to think about as you wind down, whether you're questioning your own boundaries or just grateful that your family drama is relatively normal by comparison. These situations really highlight how complicated relationships can get when expectations don't match reality, and how sometimes being the bad person in someone else's story is actually the right choice for your own well-being. Sleep well, and remember that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. I'll be back tomorrow with more stories that make you question everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. With that, make sure to subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.